Welcome to Ex Machina. Join us as we explore the mysteries of this world. Cryptids, monsters, macabre tales, and horror stories abound. Could they be true? Are monsters real?
Good evening, folks, and thank you all for joining us on another edition of Ex Machina. Joining me in the house tonight is Robbie Rip Rains, my almost identical twin brother from South Crackalacky. There are folks that can't tell us apart. Believe it or not, we've had people at the convention were calling him DA and me Robbie.
I'm sorry, DA.
I kept telling him, "Nah, I'm DA. Robbie's prettier than I am."
Yeah.
Brother, how you doing tonight?
A little tired, but I'm good.
Heard you're getting your butt kicked in football practice.
Yeah, I'm too old for this crap.
You and me both, brother. You and me both. But it's for charity, so at least you're getting beat up for a good cause.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll at least have something good to say on my tombstone. Oh, here lies the idiot, but at least it was for a good cause.
We'll make sure we get a Bigfoot inscribed on your tombstone.
And a Dogman.
And a Dogman. One on either side. Oh, well, folks, we really appreciate y'all joining us tonight. I think y'all are really going to enjoy tonight. When we get toward the latter half of the show, once we've covered the subject very well, I'm going to be reading part of Heart of Iron for y'all, like I promised. So I'll probably do the first two chapters. But if y'all are members of the Patreon, chapter 3 just went up. I just put chapter 3 up just not even an hour ago. So if you're a member of the Patreon community, you can read that third chapter because I'd already posted the first two. But tonight, me and Robbie will take turns reading aloud chapters 1 and 2 of Heart of Iron. But the subject for tonight, I think you guys are going to find pretty interesting. Most people don't even know this story even exists. This happened in 1939 during the heat of World War II. I'll kind of set the stage for you and kind of build the picture. In 1939, the war was just really getting started. Russia and Germany were still allies at the time, and Russia, under Joe Stalin, went on a big aggressive expansion campaign looking to expand Russian territories. Hey, we got a super chat already from Marcus Antonius. That is awesome. This has been a rough week. Y'all make it easier. Thank you, DA and Robbie and everyone. Hey, thank you so much. If we can help it any way at all, we sure happy to do so. And thank you for that, man. But like I said, Joe Stalin decided he was going to begin an aggressive campaign to try to expand the Soviet Union, expand territories. And he set his sights on little bitty Finland, which is on the Russian border up at the extreme northeast of Russia. Finland's a much smaller country, and Russia thought that they were going to steamroll over Finland and probably not stop till they hit Sweden. They expected to roll into Finland, kind of like they thought they were going to roll into the Ukraine right now. But what happened when they hit the Finnish lines was the Finns didn't get the memo that they were supposed to roll over and let the Russians win. The Finns fought back, and they fought back hard. And the Finns knew the territory better than the Russians did. And the Finns were using unorthodox tactics. They were using guerrilla tactics. They weren't doing stand-up slugfests with the far superior numbers of the Russian machine. The Russians were coming in with tanks, armored vehicles, and everything they could throw. And the Finns were still using, for a big chunk of it, bolt-action rifles. So they had to fight smart. Anonymous Montana gifted 5 subs. Dude, that is awesome. Thank you. Gave him to Chad Black, T. Davis, Keith Van Rensler, Chairman Mao Zedong, and Dr. Fox. Anonymous, thanks, man. We really appreciate that. If you guys know your World War II history, you know that one of the greatest snipers of all time was the guy they called the White Death. You remember his real name, Robbie?
If you hadn't asked me,
Simu Hayek.
I think Hayek. I believe I can't say for sure that
I think his
first name.
first name is Simu.
I think you're right though.
That guy, they don't even really know for sure how many Russians he took out. But the dude was unstoppable.
Wasn't he the one that Enemy at the Gate was based on?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the name.
But Simu was, he was death on a stick with a rifle, and he put down a lot of Russians. So anyway, this becomes known as the Winter War. The Russians expected to steamroll across Finland, and the Finns were having no part of that. The Finns were pushing them back at every turn, which further enraged the Russians. So the Russians decided to get creative. They thought that they could outflank the Finns, and they had already taken some territory, but not near as much as they thought they were going to get. And they decided to go around the Finnish lines into heavy forested and mountainous area, an area that the locals were telling them stay the hell out of there. That area is protected. It's got spirits in those valleys. We don't go there. And the Russians ignored them. The Russians committed an entire division. Now, those y'all who've been in the military, you know that that's not a platoon. That's not 60 dudes. They committed a division and sent them into that valley. And the few survivors of that division told a story that was like something out of a nightmare. They said that the woods came alive, that they would see dark shapes moving impossibly fast between the trees. And when the Russians went in to investigate, what they found left of their entire Red Army division had been ripped apart. There was no, they tried to say it was the Finns that did it, but the Finns, even to this day, the Finns said, nope, wasn't us. We didn't do it. We didn't go in there. We still don't go in there. The bodies were torn apart, some of them badly dismembered, and it was obvious that this was not a human that had done this. The Russians tried to say it was a pack of wolves, but it would be one hell of a pack of wolves to take out an army division, especially a division with tanks. So I think we can safely rule out a pack of rogue wolves taking out a armed and armored division of Red Army troopers. The official Russian reports were heavily redacted, and they still won't admit what they found. But they did link it to another incident that happened, well, not so far away from there. As the crow flies, it was a couple hundred miles, but they think it may have ties to the same thing that killed the people in Dyatlov Pass. So if y'all missed our Dyatlov Pass show, it'd be a good one to go back and rewatch. But tonight we're going to talk about what we think happened to that Russian division, because there's no human force that could have done what was done to that division. Anonymous says Russian division equals 5 to 10K perps. So yeah, more than 5,000 men went into that valley, and only a few hundred came out. And the ones that came out, they were either too freaked out to even talk, or just made no sense. They said the woods came alive, that things were moving impossibly fast. And the really bizarre thing is they found no bodies of anything that attacked them. Nothing. Robbie, what do you make of that?
Well,
says Themo happened.
This isn't the only story like that.
No, it is not.
Because when you first started telling me about it, I thought it sounded very similar to the Nahanni Valley.
Mm-hmm.
It also sounds very similar to the Dyatlov Pass, like you just said. And, there's certain places, like if you've got an indigenous tribe that has lived in this area for a long time, and they're telling you, no, you don't need to go in there.
You should probably listen.
You should probably listen. Since Doc ain't here, I'll pull out the big word. It would behoove you to listen to what they say.
Exactly.
And, I don't see, you know, using our example from the things we found over the past couple of months and the year or whatever, however long it's been since we started finding our little dismembered items. We were talking about how much strength it would take to do that to a deer. Well, how much strength does it take to rip someone's head off?
Or arms.
Or arms or legs. I mean, you know, and okay, yeah, it's about half past time to get the hell out of here. But, you know, Russia is, they've got that stigma rather against them. It happened to them here. It happened to them in Afghanistan. It happening to them in Ukraine. They don't seem to learn that when they start going to mess with these indigenous populations, you know, bad things happen. And that's something I would be curious to know if they had any run-ins with the Barmano or anything like that in Afghanistan, since they've spent a lot of time in Afghanistan.
You know, that's an interesting question. I've got a friend whose dad, he lives here now. You know, he was an officer. I need to get a hold of him. I served with him at the county, but they immigrated from Ukraine back when Ukraine was still part of the old Soviet Union, and his dad was in the KGB. And I would like to sit down with his dad and find out what I could find out about, you know, redacted things. And I need to sit down with him sometime. Marcus Antonius said the Winter War lasted just over 3 months in total, a timeline unimaginable today. The Winter War was short but brutal, extremely brutal, and the death count was high on both sides. But this one event, this massacre in that valley, is just something that, well, it's like Dyatlov Pass, but on a much bigger scale. Some of the bodies found had been dismembered. Some had their rib cages crushed. Some were missing tongues and eyes, like one of the members of the Dyatlov.
Mm.
You know,
or some deer we know.
Yeah, some deer we know. But the also the Dyatlov, one of the victims in the Dyatlov Pass had been crushed to death. They said that, you know, his rib cage had been pulverized like something of immense strength. You know, basically just crushed him. And there were injuries like that also among this Russian division. Some of them had their arms tore off. Some of them had been ripped open. But whatever hit them with unimaginable strength and power, especially since they didn't find the bodies of any of the attackers.
And
hey, house in the house. Hey, Greg.
House in the house. And that's, you don't have a conflict that size and that of that type and not have casualties on both sides.
Right.
So how do you only find Russians and not the people who attack people?
And it looked like the Russians didn't go down without a fight. I mean, they put up a fight, but like someone was saying, unless these things were either A, supernatural in origin, or B, carried off their dead, they didn't find a single trace of what had attacked them. And the Finns to this day are like, nope, wasn't us. The Russians tried to claim that it was just a psyop, that the Finns went in there and did it just to scare the Russians, to make them think some sort of strange creatures were in the woods. And the Finns were like, we'd love to take credit for this. This is an entire division that got their ass kicked, but we can't take credit for it because we didn't do it. Matt V says, if a gorilla is 10 times stronger than a human, imagine how many times Bigfoot is stronger than a human. Yeah, it's completely capable of doing that kind of thing. Well, heck, the show we were just talking on Saturday, the legs and head that we showed on those pictures, those had been torn off. And that takes a tremendous amount of strength. And a deer's leg is a lot smaller than a human arm or a leg.
Yeah, so I think that, and we've said it before, you don't have all these legends or whatever you want to call them folklore, whatever. You don't have them and have them match up across the face of the earth like they do, especially when you start tracing back how long a lot of these, or how old a lot of these legends are, and how closely they match up to each other. You know, it wasn't like you could just, like we say, can't use the Googles and
Right.
I like that story. I think I'm gonna tell this.
Well, there are other stories of things like this happening too. I mean, in World War One, there was an event where they said giant wolves were coming onto the battlefield and carrying off the dead out of no man's land, and that was reported by both sides. I believe it was British and German soldiers.
Yeah, and you know, no man's land is one of the most famous patches of dirt in World War One. I mean, think
Right.
about how many movies have utilized that,
Mm-hmm.
because that was some bloody fighting. I mean, that was, as far as modern warfare goes, I would say that's probably one of the worst areas that any kind of modern conflict is taking place in.
Well, the sheer amount of carnage alone, men left bleeding on, hanging on concertina wire, blown apart by mines or by explosives from cannon in no man's land. That trench warfare was horrendous, and there are
Mm-hmm.
parts of France that are too dangerous to enter even today from unexploded ordnance.
Yeah. So, well, like I was saying, I don't see how you can not take something like that seriously when you start looking into how close a lot of these things are, and they were worlds apart, literally.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, how similar is this to the Nahanni Valley and to the Dyatlov Pass, and you know,
Well, in Nahanni, they were missing with just their people are found missing their heads. But this Russian unit was many of them were, well, there were ones that were found missing their heads, but there were others that were just absolutely dismembered.
yeah. But think of the Mossy Mountain battle that we talked about. People were
The Mouse Mountain
dismembered.
massacre.
Yeah, that people were dismembered in that one too. But then look at what was the one was it Okeechobee that we
Yeah,
talked about? They were just missing heads in that one. And I think maybe one or two had lost some arms, but for the most part, they just got their heads ripped off. Maybe that's just
well,
depending
that's
on
a
what.
quick way. If you've got the strength, that is a quick way to kill an enemy.
Yeah. So, you know, if it, who knows what situation warrants what type of dismemberment. And I mean, I hate to put it that way, but I mean, you don't know what situation or how the situation's differed. But regardless of whether it's just they had their heads ripped off or some of them were completely dismembered or whatever, it's still the same thing. People were getting stuff ripped off of them that ain't supposed to be getting ripped off.
Yeah, and generally, if you get a body part ripped off, odds are real good that's fatal.
Yeah, especially back then.
No
I
kidding.
mean,
I mean, battlefield medicine has advanced a lot, but even today, unless you've got somebody right there on hand that knows what they're doing, you lose a limb on the battlefield, you got seconds to cut off the bleed.
mm-hmm. Well, it's like I said, Doc played that video for us in class that, I think it was like 11 to 14 seconds. I can't remember exactly what the time frame was before the guy bled completely out and was done after he got shot. And that was just a little bullet hole. That ain't getting an entire limb ripped off, because there's a lot of important stuff in there that comes undone, let's say.
But this case just sticks out in my head because of the sheer number of victims. I mean, this isn't like a squad went out into the woods. The squad 10 to 12 guys. Okay, it's not like when we went into Combs Ferry that we basically had a
We were
small
squad
squad.
size.
There were 7 of us. It's not like a group of 7 armed guys went into the woods and got taken apart. This is between 5 and 10,000 men. This is an entire Red Army division that was wiped out. So, if it's linked to Dyatlov Pass at all, then it was something that obviously required a tremendous amount of strength. And from the damage done, when I first read this story, I initially thought possibly it was Dogman, but the more I think about it, the more I think it is probably the Yeren, which is the Siberian version of the Yeti, which, like I put in my book, Codename Wild Hunt, Death and Dyatlov Pass. I think that was what responsible for the Dyatlov Pass incident. I also think that that's probably the same thing that took out that Russian division, and it was probably a large group of them.
We just hope there wasn't no little Master Blaster dwarves riding on their backs.
No kidding. Well, Finland is not that far from where Beowulf was supposedly taking place. That was in Norway.
That's true.
Those are not big countries. I mean, you could drive from Norway you could drive from Norway to Finland in an afternoon. It ain't like driving from California to New York. The European countries, nothing against them, but they're a lot smaller than many U.S. states. I mean, Missouri's bigger than Finland, and we're not even one of the bigger states.
Anonymous, you ain't wrong.
What Anonymous say?
But apparently Yeti loved them some Russian.
Apparently they do. So,
old Scalp Hunter had to deal with them things.
that fight ain't done.
Nope.
Steve Payton says DA could it have been both Bigfoot and Dogman? It's entirely possible because some of the damage described was almost like claws. Well, but then there were others that were just absolute dismemberments.
And here's something that, and I know this is kind of like it's in the supernatural realm rather, something we don't usually hit on. But remember how you wrote the Wild Hunt Operation Lily, where the Dogmen were being controlled by the Bigfoot? Okay, not saying that they're being controlled by the Bigfoot, but what if there was some type of, like you said, a forest spirit that was taking, there's Bigfoot, Dogman, all this kind of stuff in the forest, and the spirit didn't like the Russians, invading the forest, and it used what was there, the Bigfoot and Dogman, and pretty much brainwashed them, I guess, for lack of a better term, controlled them, and had them do that. I mean,
or let's say that area has both Bigfoot and Dogman in it. I mean, those are dense forests with not a lot of people in them. So let's say that they're both there and they compete for resources because food's scarce up there. What happens when two opposing forces have a common enemy? True. They could have easily set aside their differences, like, all right, we got a new food supply coming in. Let's just go in and deal with this problem, and we're all going to eat good for the rest of the winter.
You talking the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
That's right. Absolutely. I would think that, Bigfoot and Dogman, both being intelligent creatures, could reasonably set aside their issues to deal with this incursion into their territory.
Yeah, I mean, any of that I think could be a possible scenario that could have started this. Like we always say, who knows? It's all speculation and all, just our opinions.
Oh, absolutely.
Throwing it out there. I mean, who knows if we're right? Who knows if we're? I mean,
this happened, 85 years ago. So, it's impossible to say for sure because the Russians, the only information they've released about it was highly redacted. The Russians don't even like to admit that it even happened. The Finns are more open about it. The Finns are like, yeah, it happened, but we still don't know what did it. We know the event happened because both sides will admit that there was a division wiped out there, but nobody's giving any answers on what did it. Hey, thanks, Anonymous. Appreciate that, brother. Appreciate the $10 tip, dude. But to me, a bunch of pissed off cryptids makes a lot more sense.
I mean, that is what I think, and don't tempt me, Rodney. I'll do it.
I would love to go. Hell yeah. But the thing about it is even now, that is an undeveloped section of Finland up near the Arctic Ocean. So, getting up there, we're going to have to go in on skis and dog sleds essentially. So, yeah, I would love to go, but getting there is probably not practically possible, at least not at this point in my life. Kay Bowers, yeah, you're right. He says, DA, I'm sure someone knows something. They're just not talking. I would agree, but the Russians did suggest that the cause might be the same as what happened in the Dyatlov Pass.
Yeah, Josh, that's exactly where you think I got that or put that idea together from the Monster Hunter International book. Because there's a lot of stuff in his book that I think with some working around, you two could share the same universe with the way he does his books. Larry Correa.
Monster Hunter International.
Yeah. And that the one that Dalton's talking about is when they were on that island.
Larry's a great writer.
Yeah.
I would love to do a project with Larry one day. But then again, I'm not on Larry's radar. So he's probably never even heard of me.
I'm sure he's at home saying, D.A. Roberts has never heard of me.
Yeah, right. The dude owns a mountain in Utah.
I had to pull the Top Gun line out. Yeah, he's probably saying, holy shit, it's Maverick and Goose. Yeah, I'm sure he's saying that, Mav.
Time to buzz the tower.
Just your idea of fun, Mav. And we have derailed.
Anonymous says, don't think you'd find many native Finns willing to guide you. Probably not, because they, even to this day, they're like, don't go in there. It is an area that is a haunted / off limits area, because they believe the woodland spirits guard and protect those valleys, and they don't go there, not even to hunt. Roxanne says, DA, do you know the name of the creature the natives warned the Russians about? I can't remember, but the name, let alone spell it. I can't remember what they called it. I'd have to go back and find that original article that I read about this. But they did warn about a nature spirit, a Finnish nature spirit. Let me see if I can consult the Googles.
Gotta look at the Googles. I thought that was so funny when Annette told me that. Dang it, you done got me saying that now.
Yeah. And I joke about it too. I'll say, let me look that up on the Googles. And she goes, you and Robbie need to knock that off, because I say that all the time now.
I grow on you like fungus. I've even seen people put it in the chat too. So
yeah, you should trademark it, Robbie.
A broke clock's right even twice a day.
That's true. I can't find it. I'm finding a whole list of Finnish spirit animals, but I'm not finding. But they do believe in what they refer to. They're called picos, or trolls. And we've often said that what the Norse believed were trolls sounds very much like a Bigfoot.
Yep.
So they believe in trolls. Large, hairy creatures that live in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Take children.
I wonder what that kind of sounds like.
We've said it time and time again. Every major culture on every continent has some type of legend, folklore, story about something just like this or just like this. I don't think that's coincidence.
I agree. Roxanne, if you can find the name of that, let me know. But I can't spend a whole lot of time Googling it and still talk.
Look at Cajun Dog. What he said. What if Sasquatch are a smaller version of trolls?
Yeah. And what if trolls is just how they referred to remnant Neanderthals.
I mean, that's like we say, look in nature. What's the difference in size from a polar bear to a Kodiak bear? They're still bears. Yeah, they're still bears, but or even look at like say just a regular black bear versus a polar bear.
Yeah,
look at the massive difference in size in that. They're still
look
bears.
Look at the old short-faced bear.
Yeah, the one
If
that can
those are
stand up and
still
look over your
around, like
house.
a lot of people think, this is a bear that stood on its hind legs around 20 feet and weighed as much as a large SUV. BJ Anderson says, "Is it Viron Susi DA?" I cannot remember for the life of me what it was called. Bottom of the hour, DA. Thanks, Kevin. Well, let's take just a quick second to hear a quick word from our little buddy. We'll take a short break with an even shorter guy, and hear a quick word from Doc over at Dark Angel Medical.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DA Roberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
And don't forget to, I put the wrong one up. Way to go, dummy. I said the right thing, but I put up the wrong banner. Don't forget, if you go by Dark Angel Medical, don't forget to use discount code Cryptid20 for 20% off your entire order. And let them know we sent you. Send the short guy a short message.
He'll appreciate it.
He will appreciate it. He may not appreciate us, but or at least me.
It's just a little humor.
Just a little joke. We'll say a prayer for him, a little prayer.
Yeah.
But back to the incident. I mean, the Russians did compare it to Dyatlov Pass, and they would have firsthand information of both incidents. Now, Dyatlov didn't happen for 20 years after this. Dyatlov was in 1959, and this happened in 1939. But comparisons were made by the Russian investigators comparing Dyatlov to that incident. So since they, were the ones that investigated both incidents, and they saw firsthand the damage done to the bodies, to me that lends a lot of credibility to our theory about Dyatlov, that this was some type of Yeti, whether you want to call it the Alma, the Almas, the Yeti, or whatever, Yeren. There are lots of names in Asia for this type of creature, but it seems like the ones up that way they're dangerous. They're a lot more aggressive, kind of like bears. The farther north you get, the more aggressive the bears get. Look at polar bears. Polar bears are confirmed man-eaters. And the short-faced bear, if it's still around, that's a bear that, like I said, weighs as much as a large SUV. Can you imagine that thing coming at you? Like a freight train, a 19 to 20 foot tall bear. That could do a lot of damage and would probably take a large ordnance to take it out. But I don't think this was a short-faced bear. I think this was more something like a Yeti. And it certainly wasn't just one. You know how long it would take one creature to kill a division?
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Even if there was one or two, that's not going to cause that extreme amount of carnage.
One or two could take out a squad, maybe a platoon. But an entire armored division? No.
And that's the thing too. Yeah, it's easy to kind of get lost on the people, but the people had tanks.
Yeah.
So that in itself says something more than just a normal run-of-the-mill creature was involved in this.
Anonymous, it said that they had tanks in the division. It wasn't a tank division, but they were tanks backing up the division. They were trying to push deep into Finland and come in behind the resistance. So yeah, they took tanks and armored vehicles with them, but it didn't do them any good.
And like what Kay's saying about the SS werewolves, I don't think they were probably working on them at that time, because they didn't really start that till around World War II, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was World War II, 1939 through 1945. This was early in World War II.
Oh, I think we were talking about No Man's Land earlier. That's when we were talking about World War One. Sorry.
Yeah, World War One. The incident was the giant wolves coming out into no man's land and dragging off bodies.
So could have very well been something like that, but I don't know. I think Hitler had his own agenda, and I don't think, unless that was going to help his agenda, I think he would probably leave anybody that was even on his own side out to dry if it wasn't going to help his agenda.
Judy Wheeler says, didn't they have burn marks also? Not that I remember. The article I read was talking about brutal wounds and being torn open and torn apart, but I don't remember anything about burn damage. I could be wrong, but I don't remember reading anything about burn damage. To me, it just screamed of some sort of brutal physical attack. Gary, the tanks were still there. My guess is they got hit during the night when they were encamped, and they didn't make it back to their tanks. There was no indication that the tanks were used in the fighting, but that might explain some of the survivors, that they might have buttoned down in that tank and waited for daylight. But it doesn't say. It just said that there was a handful of survivors, and none of them made sense what they were saying. They said it was like the woods came alive. Things were moving between the trees. They would see shadows. They would see things moving impossibly fast. Got a super chat from Vincent Ellison. Thank you. And Larry Sharp gifted another membership. That's awesome. It went to Cynthia and Prince. Larry, thank you, man. Appreciate that, dude. So, looking at the amount of damage done, I agree with you, Robbie. I'm seeing the connections there. The Nahanni Valley, the Headless Valley in the Superstition Mountains. There's lots of stories about, people being brutally killed. Hell, right now, up in Montana, there was a guy who they tried to say a black bear killed. And the wounds are not consistent with a black bear. This guy was taken apart in his tent, and they're talking large chopping wounds, not like it was mauled by a bear. And this one is another one of those weird cases.
Well, yeah, and like we were talking about, even if you got the difference of, okay, in the Nahanni Valley, most of them were headless, and then other over here, some of them were headless, some of them were dismembered. Still, there's what does that in the natural world that we know of? I mean, even some of our biggest predators, polar bears, they don't go around they eat people, we know that, but they don't go around just ripping people apart and leaving the pieces laying around.
Just a guy who yaps says, DA, what's a chop wound? Deep tissue wounds, singular wounds, not like claws raked across, but something went deep into the tissue, almost like an axe. But again, it could have been something that just literally ripped them apart, because when you put a lot of torque on tissue, I've seen, from car wrecks and stuff, people that have had their skin split, and it almost looks like a scalpel. I mean, just perfectly straight line, and it had nothing to do with a knife. So what they're referring to as chop wounds could have been tearing wounds.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's entirely possible that if there were both Dogman and Bigfoot type creatures in those woods, they'd put aside their differences to go after a much larger threat.
Well, but that could that could explain the differences between the types of injuries.
It wasn't just one type of creature that was attacking them.
Because I would personally think that something that was completely dismembered and torn apart and looked like it went through a wood chipper, I would say that's probably a Dogman. But the ones that just had just like it's that, like it's all just had his head and arms ripped off, I would say that's more of a Bigfoot type thing. Because we know that Mossy Mountain, we know that was Bigfoot because we had people that come out of there that described him. But we've also seen like the LBL. We know what happened to that family, and that more describes some of the other stuff that we saw that we talked about tonight. So
Facebook user says, besides the dismembering, were there any signs of something feeding on the bodies? One thing that I can comment about that is it said not all of the bodies were accounted for.
Which I think that would make sense too. Because I mean, and even if it wasn't, you're still going to have your normal scavengers and things like that. They're going to come in and
this was a brutal cold winter.
Still, things got to eat.
Yeah, and if there were wolf packs in the area, they would have been brought in by all that carnage.
Yeah.
So once the whatever killed them was done, I guarantee you, wolves came in and dragged off bodies or fed on the ones that were left behind. But some of the bodies were found like torn open and frozen in place. I mean, absolute brutal cold. Arkansas Hog Hunter says, reckon they all heard about the new Russian buffet with carryout. Russian style long pig.
Yeah. It's like, hey, did y'all hear about the $5 all you can eat buffet coming in?
Kenny Bauer says, can't really count someone if they're paced. He says, gross, I know, but you ain't wrong. If there wasn't enough left of them to identify, it might have been very difficult to say how many bodies they found. But the Russians don't give details of exactly how many they brought out, but it did say that not all of them were accounted for. Charles Evans says, DA, with any tracks at all other than known animals? The Russians didn't say. They didn't identify any kind of tracks. I would imagine it would be, with that much snow on the ground and that cold, it would be almost impossible for that kind of battle to happen and not leave some kind of sign. But the Russians are very careful about what they say happened.
Yep.
And for them to link it to Dyatlov Pass, again, that to me, that almost screams some sort of Yeti attack.
And the fact that they're not releasing anything about or not saying anything about tracks or anything like that, to me, that says there probably was. Because
considering how far north this is in Russia slash Siberia, and where Finland lies, what do they call that? Kolyatsikal, the mountain that around Dyatlov Pass, is not that far away. Probably a day's drive.
Yeah. And there's like you mentioned Siberia. There's tons and tons and tons of stories about Siberian tigers that have went on killing sprees and killed lots of people, and they killed the tiger that they quote unquote said, okay, this is the man eater. They got him or her, but yet stuff like this still keeps on happening.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like the tigers might be getting blamed for some stuff that they ain't completely and totally 100%.
Well, you talk about man-eating tigers in India. The Indus River Valley is one of the places that Alexander the Great said that they encountered these dog-headed warriors.
Yep.
And even today, there are valleys up there that the Indian people that live in that area say they don't go to because those dog-headed warriors are still up there.
Well, think about the stories that some of our soldiers told in Vietnam. getting stalked by
Rock apes.
reptile, and rock apes and reptile type cryptids.
Mm-hmm. You know, as dense as those jungles are, it would not surprise me that there's stuff out there we don't know of. I mean, how recently was it that they discovered that species of deer that has the nostrils on the side of its head? I mean, that was a brand new species, and it's a big animal. And you know, we didn't know it existed until like what 30, 40 years ago.
So something like that, 20-30 maybe.
K Bauer says, just a thought, if it's real, Victor, the government hunter, said a dogman in a tunnel in Vietnam wiped out a platoon in 30 minutes. If that's the channel I'm thinking of, I'm not 100% sure how much credibility I put into it, but I won't get into that. Larry Bertrand says maybe a large pack of Finnish Wendigos. You know, the Wendigo legend is largely in the Algonquin regions, but if you went straight north up into the Arctic Circle, which is usually frozen over, there's nothing to stop them. I mean, if a Wendigo exists that far north in our part of the world, maybe there are Siberian and Northern European legends of similar creatures. That's something worth looking into. Just a guy says, doesn't Vietnam also have the world's largest cave system that has a full ecosystem? Yeah, I believe it was in Vietnam when they discovered that. But there are massive cave systems all over the world. Hell, in Siberia, Lake Baikal is the deepest lake in the world. That one lake in Russia contains approximately 20% of the world's fresh water.
That's
It
considering
has more lake in it than all of the Great Lakes combined.
that's a lot considering how much water is on this planet.
Yeah. So Lake Baikal is massive. Northwest Native Tracker says, funny Quaztequal is another name known to Native Americans as being particular to a specific species of critter bigger and meaner than our forest brothers. I've not heard of that one. I'll have to see what I can find about that. Maz says it was only new to science. The locals knew of it. Exactly. It's kind of like the billy ape. I mean, the locals had been saying for years that the billy ape was out there. And of course, you know, I'd have to grab my pith helmet, but do my British accent properly. Oh no, that couldn't possibly exist. And you know, then National Geographic catches it on trail cam. They're like, oh, I guess it does.
Well, mountain gorillas, billy apes, giant pandas, all those things were described by native cultures.
At one point, they were cryptids.
And they were cryptids. And people were like, nah, yeah, whatever. There's no large semi-bipedal black and gray apes that live in the mountains of Africa. Now you can go to just about any zoo in the United States and see them.
Right. Patricia Gambino says, DA, look how much of Siberia has not been explored. There's a family that left Russia because of religious persecution. They were discovered in the 80s and didn't know about World War II. Same thing with Canada. There are massive portions of northern Canada where no human may have ever walked, at least not as far as we know. I mean, they're just massive swaths of unexplored forest up there. And it's the same with Siberia. I mean, have the area around Tunguska, where that big explosion took place, you can still see the damage, but there are like 2 villages in that entire region, and neither of them are very big. Cajun Dog says, hey, DA, is there something similar to the Wendigo over there in Finland? I think there is. They've got a lot of nature spirits that they mention and talk about living in the deep woods, and some of them will eat unwary travelers. So it may be something entirely similar to the Wendigo.
Yep.
It's one time we were all one continent. So if any of these ancient magics or ancient supernatural things are around, it's entirely possible they exist in more than one place.
And Kay, yes, you're talking about the giant ground sloth, which was That's a good representation in F-350. It was a big animal, which there's a lot of people think that it was responsible for some of the legends like the Mapinguari and things like that.
Well, MK Davis thinks that the Honey Island swamp monster might be a giant sloth or a Mapinguari because of the 3 toes.
Yep.
Facebook user says, who knows what's roaming around in Siberia, for that matter, other large forests people rarely travel around in. Exactly. That's why I scoff when someone says it's impossible for a creature like Bigfoot to exist. All you've got to do is look at a satellite map of the United States, an actual satellite image, not like just a basic Google image. Go to Google Images and click on the satellite link and zoom out so you can see the entire United States. And I'm just talking the United States here, of all the unbroken green that still exists. We like to think we've settled the whole country, but there are still massive swaths of this country that are completely undeveloped. Old growth forests, deep valleys, and places that people just don't go. I mean, there are mountain peaks and the valleys in the Rocky Mountains that may have never seen a human set foot in them.
Yep, 100%.
Judy Wheeler says, I've heard scientists and nuclear physicists have been studying the Almasty tribes that lived in a remote area of Russia for hundreds of years. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we ignore native lore, and I'm not just talking Native American. I mean, natives, no matter where you go in the world, we ignore native wisdom at our peril. I mean, because they've lived, especially some of the more primitive societies, like, for example, the Aborigines in Australia. They still live very close to the land. Now, granted, a lot of them have come into town, and there's a lot of people that have I guess I hate to use the word become civilized, but have adapted to modern living. But a lot of those tribes still live the way they did hundreds of years ago. And when they talk about some of these creatures out there, we should listen. Because they live out there. They live a lot closer to nature than we do. And for us to ignore it is we do so at our peril. Because even if they're trying to explain it in metaphysical terms, that doesn't mean it's not a physical creature. That just, again, when we don't understand something, we tend to ascribe a lot of supernatural abilities to it. And in a lot of those cases, they said they thought the mountain gorilla was a mystical creature. Well, we know it's just another animal, but it was so elusive and lived in the deep regions of the jungle that European explorers didn't see one for more than 100 years. But the natives have been saying they were there for a long time. And we run into that all the time. Western science just kills me because, where they're like, no, that didn't exist. And then they found dinosaurs. There were no dragons. There were no dinosaurs. Boom, dinosaur bones. Oh, no. There were no giant pandas. Boom, giant pandas. We keep saying no, that these things don't exist, and we're proven wrong time and time again.
Yeah, I'm like you. I don't get the level of audacity that these so-called scientists have. And to me, that's the definition of a scientist. Should be somebody who doesn't say that's impossible. He should be somebody saying, well, how can I prove that it does exist or that it did exist? Not, oh no, that doesn't. No way.
Right.
To me, it seems somebody who that would be like me or you going to a crime scene and saying, looking in, like you say, looking in the window and seeing somebody with a gunshot wound in their head and saying, no, they weren't shot. It was a heart attack.
You can't solve that crime by looking through the window.
Yeah. You have to get in there and you have to dig and you have to find out what happened, and that's, to me, I guess that's the biggest slap in the face is they would rather ridicule those of us who have seen these things. And you've used this example many times. How many times have we took statements from people that have put people in jail, but yet if you took a statement from that same person who said they saw a Bigfoot, they would be called crazy. But their statement's good enough to put somebody in jail for the rest of their life, but it's not good enough to say that we believe that they saw what they saw.
It's not like the only people that are seeing Bigfoot are the ones we used to laugh about, from back in the 70s. They'd interview some guy from northern Arkansas with bibbed overalls on with one strap done and no t-shirt on underneath. Yep, I saw the Sasquatch and he stole my chickens. It's not that. I mean, we laugh about that, and I've got cousins that are just like that. Love you guys, but yes, I do have cousins that are just like that. But it's not like that. I mean, there are a lot of hill folk that see these things, but they don't generally talk about it to outsiders because people think they're crazy. But I've talked to doctors and lawyers and a couple of judges and loads of cops and railroad workers and people from all walks of life that have had encounters with these things, and they just can't wrap their brain around that thing really being real. It really just freaks them out, and they don't want their names mentioned because, when you're working as a heart surgeon, not going to name any names, or if you're working as, a sitting federal judge, you don't want your credibility called online called into question, because these guys got a lot of stuff a lot of things to lose by coming forward with these stories. Yet I've heard stories from these very same guys. They've asked me to keep their name out of it, and I will honor that request. But I've talked to some very credible, very influential people that are like, you cannot quote me on this, but this is what I saw, and I don't know what the hell it was.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's just that just kind of, and it's like Gary said, scientists that speak in absolutes. Nobody on the face of this earth can speak in an absolute because you do not know what's going to happen from one instant to the next. There is no way.
Roxanne found it. The Viron Susi. It's a werewolf type creature. Sounds to me like a Dogman.
Yep.
That's what the Finns call it, the Viron Susi. Thank you, Roxanne. Really appreciate you digging that up for me. You're awesome.
Good job, Roxanne. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I think sometimes they get so wrapped up in their reputation, and that's all that matters to a lot of them is, oh, well, if I look into this, then there goes my tenure, there goes my reputation. I won't be invited to all the big parties and, all the social science events and all this kind of stuff. Instead of getting out there, like Dr. Meldrum, he could care less what people say about him.
Exactly.
He just wants to get out there and he said the same thing that we have. And I said it last night on Paranormal Odyssey. Look at it from the standpoint of if this was a hoax, think about how big of an organization and a coordinated effort by millions and millions of people that it would have to be to keep something like this, if it was a hoax, to keep something like that going for as long as it has. When you start thinking about it in terms like that, it really starts getting to the point where you gotta say, there's no way it can be a hoax. Because we've said it before, if even one person out of millions that say they have seen this or seen this creature, if one of those people is right, and let's say everybody else is lying, but one person is not, that means they're true. It's true. So you have to start thinking about stuff in terms like that to the bigger picture type thing. Quit looking at it as in this one specific creature cannot exist. Okay, well, if it doesn't, then how come you've got all these legends and all these things? Yeah, you're right, Kay. It would be a generational hoax. It's something that would have to. That's why I say it would have to be a global corporation that hired millions and millions of people all over the planet to keep this thing going. And you think a company like that has that many people that was doing something like that, every single one of them is going to keep their mouth shut and be able to keep something like that secret?
To me, it's more reasonable to believe these creatures exist than believe, like Robbie was saying, that there's a worldwide conspiracy dating back 1,000 years of people trying to hoax us.
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to plain brass tacks. What makes more sense and what's more logical?
That and like Robbie said, out of all the thousands of reports, and I believe we've only received a small fraction of the reports. I think far more people have had experiences and refused to come forward than have actually come forward. So, bearing that in mind, out of the thousands of sightings, even if only one of them was true, then they exist.
Well, and Arlen Neal said it, we've talked about that before. The term dinosaur wasn't coined until the 1800s.
Right.
But the term dragon, and not to make this religious, but the term dragon was used over 100 times in the Bible.
Well, dinosaur just means terrible lizard.
Terrible lizard. Yep.
And that kind of describes a dragon, if you ask me.
Yeah. It's just it is what do you call it? A descriptive connotation.
Kay Bowers says, and the first question someone asks is, what were you drinking? I've drank a lot and never saw Dogman, which is exactly why we have a standing policy. Like Robbie, when he comes to town, well, believe me, we'll have a few beers by the fire pit in my backyard. But when we're in the woods, we're all business. Only thing we're drinking is Gatorade and water.
Yep.
Wyatt says unicorns were also mentioned in the Bible. I didn't know that. While says, what will the next book be as in Wild Hunt Dark Frontiers? It's the first of a new series. It's called, the series is going to be the World of Valgard series. The first book is called Heart of Iron. And here in about half an hour, we're going to read a little bit from it. Roxanne, I will have to hunt the article back up. I didn't save it like an idiot. I've really got to make a habit of when I find one of these articles, saving a copy, so I don't have to hunt it up later. But I'll find the article. I found a couple of good YouTube videos on this subject too. But if I find the article, I'll try to find the article and get it to you. 3D Havoc says, are there more stories from Russia? I only ever hear of Winter War Massacre, but no others. Yeah, there are other stories from Russia. Supposedly, there was one, a Alma or Almasty, captured by a Russian general in the Ural Mountains during World War II. And it got free and killed several soldiers on the train. They were trying to bring it back to Moscow. It got free, killed several soldiers, and escaped before they could get it back to Moscow. But yeah, there are a number of stories in Russia of them encountering these type of creatures. Lots of stories of the Siberian. I don't remember what the Siberian word is. That word that they refer to themselves, but they're essentially distant cousins of our Inuits that live in Alaska. Basically, Siberian Eskimos. And they have lots of stories of these creatures. Gary Lowe says, if I see a Bigfoot or Dogman, I'm probably going to need a drink. Trust me, brother. Yeah. After my sighting in LBL, I needed a few, hand steadying drinks. Roxanne says there was one that was dead, sent back to Moscow. I think they did bring bodies back to Moscow, but they were there. The word from I believe it was Stalin, was to bring as many of them in alive as they could, because they were going to try to turn them into soldiers. The Lap people. Thank you, Northwest Native Tracker. Appreciate that. Hey, Edie's in the house. What's up, man? Anonymous Montanans quoting Airplane. Don't get Robbie started.
I saw it. I kept my mouth shut. I saw it. Kept my mouth shut.
I'm proud of you, Robbie.
Doc's not here, so I don't have anybody to bounce it off of, because you try to keep me in line. So
if Noah was here, we'd be off the rails for sure.
I'm being good.
So the Finns talk about a werewolf type creature. And that to me sounds like a Dogman.
But what do we say? Every culture on every continent has stories about these types of creatures.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Are they all just independently creating the same lie?
Mm-hmm.
No.
It's a worldwide hoax. Just we figured it out. That's it. It's a worldwide hoax.
It's
They're all in on it.
The Ouroboros Society. They're behind it all.
Yep. Old Colonel Stratton's done got it going on.
Kevin Bode said Yupik. The Yupiks are in Alaska. Fred Roll's a Yupik. What was I going to say? Kind of derailed my train of thought.
At least it wasn't me this time.
No, my train of thought derails pretty easily.
Mine too.
Northwest Native says, "You're welcome. My father's side of the family had Lap heritage and stories of some weird things. Every indigenous tribe, whether they're from Asia, Africa, or North America, South America, every indigenous tribe talks about creatures like this, whether they call it the Mapinguari, the Yowie, the Yeren, the Alma, the Almasti, the Chiatanka, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever they call it. They're all describing similar creatures, some more violent than others, but yet they all describe similar type creatures. And to me, that's where this inevitably takes us. I think that this Russian unit strayed into an area where there was a heavy Dogman presence. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that these creatures that the Finns refer to. What was the word again?
Something sushi. Viron Sushi or something, or Susi.
I think it's Viron Susi. Sushi.
I know it was something with a V and a Susi.
Viron Susi. But they describe it as a werewolf type creature, and they believe it's a supernatural creature. But to me, that just sounds like another explanation for a Dogman. Same thing with werewolf stories throughout Europe and through like Romania. What if that was the whole entire werewolf legend was just an attempt to explain these dog-headed creatures? Because we know from the cynocephali that the history of seeing these things dates back thousands of years.
That's what we're talking about. I mean, you crawl in a cave out here on the plains of South Dakota and see a drawing of a Bigfoot that they date back, hundreds and hundreds of years, and then you can look at the Pure Rice map and see
the same creatures in the margins.
And see those same creatures drawn at the edges of those maps. And that thing's 8th century, I think you said, or at least.
They believe that the Pura Rice version comes from the 8th century, and they believe it's a copy of a much older map.
So, I mean, things like this have been the story of the Roman legion that basically got almost wiped out by a group of werewolves, cynocephali, dog-headed, whatever you want to call them. I mean,
there's a show in that as well. We'll talk about Legio 9 Hispania and what happened to them. There's a lot of speculation on Legio 9, but the only things we know for absolute fact is they marched north of Hadrian's Wall and were never heard from again.
But they did find his journal or whatever, isn't that?
Yeah, there's a. I think I'm actually going to probably do a book about the Lost Legion at some point.
I wonder who's going to be in that one.
Yeah, I think we can figure out who's going to be in that one. Boondock says, "Hey DA, hey Boondock, what's up, dude?" Roxanne says, "Makes one wonder, developing from a type of dire wolf." I think that we may be closer than you think on that. I've said that before, because so many times people talk about Dogman approaching on all fours, then they hear a popping sound as it stands up. What if dire wolf learned to use its paws like hands? I've seen species of modern dogs. Hell, I've seen my Mastiff, cup things with its paw and put it in its mouth. He's passed away now, but I've seen him do that many times. But there are lots of examples of dogs that have learned to grip things with their paws. What if that was an adaptation that just continued to evolve? And these things could have come from that.
Well,
I mean, supposedly the last of the dire wolves died out like 60,000 years ago, but that doesn't mean they did.
do you remember that clip I sent of the dog that didn't have any front legs and it had learned to walk on its hind legs?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously it was a regular dog, so it wasn't but like that tall, but still.
Anonymous Montanan says, Finnish people know their werewolves by the name Viron Susi, which translates into Estonian wolf. Estonia is just to the south of Finland. Estonian is also called Viro in Finland in Finnish. I think ruling out cryptids as the cause of the massacre in 1939 is a disservice. I do believe that both the Dyatlov Pass incident and this may share certain common threads, because I can tell you from the descriptions of the wounds and the way the attack was perpetrated, nothing human did that. Now, the survivors were saying that they saw dark shadows moving on two legs between the trees impossibly fast. And I can tell you from personal experience, that Dogman I saw in LBL was stupid fast. It covered an area about 30 yards across in 3 steps and then was gone. I mean, once it realized I saw it, it was gone so freaking quick. There was zero time for me to get my phone up to try to get images. It was just that fast. I only saw it for a few seconds. In the first 10 seconds, the thought of capturing an image didn't even enter my brain. I was too busy, staring open mouthed and punching Nick in the shoulder, trying to get him to stop. But as fast as these things are, and that's one of the things that bugs me when people have sightings, is because you get all these like people that are on Facebook or in chat groups or anything like that will say, "Well, how come you didn't take a picture?" Well, I can tell you personal experience. I was so stunned, the thought of taking a picture didn't even enter my brain, and by the time I thought of it, it was long gone. Robbie, the one you saw when you were a kid, did you ever think I should grab a camera and take a picture of this thing?
No. I was, like you said, I was just like,
yeah.
And then as soon as it registered in my mind what I was looking at,
Now, when Noah and I were in Joe Bald just a few days ago, when we found the dismembered deer, yeah, we did think to get out and take pictures then. And I took some pictures of just random trees, hoping to catch something moving or peering around a tree. I haven't found anything of those random shots. But I had the DSLR around my neck. All I needed to do was point and just hold the button down, and it would have taken a crap ton of pictures. But I'm more prepared for that now. My first sighting of a Dogman, I was just absolutely floored.
I mean,
Cajun Dog's right. If you manage to get a picture of one, go play the lottery. You'll have better luck. Yeah, I would say it is, I would liken it to winning the lottery, of getting a clear photo of a cryptid. Because I go up prepared now. And you guys watched the show on Saturday. You guys watched the show when Robbie and I talked about our time in Combs Ferry. Wyatt can attest to it. He's in the audience tonight. I could get Lieutenant Jenkins or Lieutenant Estrella to come on and tell what they saw. Steve's told you guys what he saw. We've encountered plenty of things that are solid evidence, but the clear image is eluding us because these things are smart and they don't want to be caught.
Yep.
Chris Burkhardt says, while there may be similarities between this and Dyatlov Pass, there's no similarities with a gaggle of college kids in a battle-hardened division. You're absolutely correct, but I think both of them ran into something that they were not prepared for. The Dyatlov group, I think, well, they weren't even armed. All they had was, cameras with them. They were just planning on a trek through the wilderness. I think something picked them off and picked them off pretty easily. But in the case with this Russian division, they went in someplace they weren't supposed to go, and something was not happy about it.
And Chris, what we're talking about with similarities is just how people were dispatched.
Right, the way they were killed, not necessarily, that these were both battle-hardened groups, but just the way they were taken out. Wyatt says, "Amen, DA." Thanks, Wyatt. I need to get Wyatt on the show one of these nights. So when we next time we do a show where we're going to talk about Combs Ferry, because we're planning on going back in there, folks. I want to go back in there once the bugs are dead, and we seem to get a lot more activity. And I've noticed this at Joe Bald. We have more active times, and Robbie can attest to this as well. It's more active when the temperature's cooler, and as active as Combs Ferry was, I'm a little worried about what we're going to run into in colder weather there, because it was stupid active in hot weather, middle of July.
Yeah, we're definitely long gunning it next time we go.
Yeah, next time. I'm taking I'll probably take the Keltec, unless I've got that Benelli clone by then.
Oh, I'm at least gonna have the blackout.
Big girl.
Well, hopefully.
If you're going to carry the blackout, bring the big girl. I'll carry her.
Okay. Well, I'm going to bring it.
Oh, yeah, I know you will.
There's not a question of if I'm going to bring it. It's just, yes, it's going to be there. But
yeah, I'll put that on a single point. Wyatt and I were just talking tonight about another trip into Combs Ferry, and I got a comment on one of the videos. That's video from Saturday. I got a comment from one of the people that watched the video. I don't know if they watched live or if they just watched it later, but they said, "Hey, there's another abandoned park off of, I think it was 82 or 84 highway over by Blue Eye." So I pulled it up on the maps and started going over it, and they're talking about the backside of Combs Ferry. So there is a way to get to it by land, but you're going to have to hike in, because it's not accessible by road. You've got to park a ways back and then hike in. It's probably easier to get in there by boat, and then we're not pressed for time, because from what I hear, that area is patrolled pretty well. So any vehicle parked there is probably going to get the law called on you. So I think going in by boat's still our best bet, but I absolutely want to go back in there.
Anonymous, that's what the big girl is.
Yeah,
what he's talking about.
The big 454 big girl.
458.
458. That's right. 458 big girl. Northwood says, sounds like you could use some kind of air support back when you go back in there. Yeah. Here's the thing. If we can get it, even if I've got to rent a pontoon boat, if we can get it there, I'd like to go set off the cove in broad daylight and run my drone over it. Robbie's got a nice drone. I've got a nice drone. I would like to set out there on the pontoon and just circle that entire peninsula with the drones and see what we can see moving during the day, and then go in at night.
Mm-hmm.
I think next time we're going to be a lot better prepared. This first time, Robbie and I'll tell you, every time we go out, it's a learning thing. We learn something new every time we go out, but each time we also go out a little better prepared. And Jenkins has said him and Australia are both more than happy to go out with us. KC said he wants to go. I think Kevin wants to go, and Wyatt's down anytime. Wyatt's ready and willing anytime we want to go into the woods. I'm pretty sure. Roxanne says, DA call Gray Eagle and the Wild Hunt team to go with you. Everybody that went in got a Wild Hunt patch. Absolutely. Everybody that went in got a Wild Hunt patch. Where's that one at? I must have put it somewhere else. I thought, oh, nope, there it is. Yeah, everyone, Wyatt included, everyone got one of these that went in with us. And I think that's going to be the standard. I think anytime we take somebody out, they earn their patch. Because the only time we've kind of been disappointed from what we found is that time we went to Joe Bald in July. Joe Bald was completely inactive. But then Noah and I went back last Friday, not even a week ago, and well, you guys saw the show. So Marcus Antonius says best burger footage these days are with drones, well worth the money. Chris Burghardt says, do y'all have nods? Doc's got a set. I can't afford a set. Uh, I'm not, I'm not trying to talk out of school here, but this last couple months have been pretty tight for us, and right now I'd have to finance bubble gum.
I've got a psionics camera, which is pretty close to that. It's not true night vision, but you can see pretty good in it. The bad thing about the psionics is, and D will tell you, it kills your night vision.
It does.
You literally as soon as you take it off, you can't see anything.
Lyle McThompson says Grey Eagle's still in another dimension. He won't be after this book that comes out, Heart of Iron. Grey Eagle's coming home. Cajun Dog says need a combat engineer. We just might. We're gonna have to put a disclaimer together. Yeah, we're not responsible for you getting
Et by a wolf and shit over a cliff.
That's right.
As Doc would say.
Just a guy says, how about a thermal? Had one, it died. You can ask Robbie about it. I put brand new batteries in it at the house. We took it to Joe Bald the first time we took Robbie down there, and they exploded when I tried to turn it on. So my night vision's dead. I'm gonna have to replace it, but I don't have the money to replace it right now. Chris Burkhart says, but if it's like your theory with their fur, maybe nods won't help. May not.
Which might explain why there's not any thermal image of them, or not a lot of thermal images of them. I think we've seen a couple of clips that could possibly be. I wish we could get a hold of that clip we saw, 2 years ago that somebody showed us.
Hold on just a second. I'm looking for something. Okay. Yeah, I was going to bring something up. For those of you all who have not seen the Joe Bald breakdown footage, I'm going to pop a couple images up. This is what we caught on the original video in Joe Bald. Hold on a second. I got to move this over so I can share the image. Y'all haven't had a chance to watch the Joe Bald breakdown video. You should probably check it out. It's right here on the channel. But this is what we found in one of the stills. Granted, this video was shot on a cell phone camera when we were not expecting to find anything. We were shooting a promo for the book, The Lakeview Man. And right here, you can see the hand and the head of what popped around that tree. Now, let me, that one's too small. Now bring that one up a little bit. You can, that red line shows you what the face of what's sticking out. That's Joe Bald. Sorry. There we go. This is the one. That's the one that looks like you can see the hand and you can see the nose and the ears. That was about 9 feet up on the side of a tree. To me, what you all think, I may disagree, but that looks like a wolf type head to me.
Yep.
But that's what appeared behind us in Joe Bald when Steve and I went down there the very first time. So that's as close to catching something truly bizarre on film as we've managed to get. Here's a better close up of that. Let me share this again. A little clearer image. That was looking out behind me on on a few frames of the video, and it was probably within 20 yards of us. And again, you look, there's the nose and the snout, the pointed ears, the eyes. And to me, this just it's probably the best image I've ever captured, and we didn't even know we'd captured it. Yeah, we didn't know it was back there. And that's why that night when me and Robbie and Noah were in Joe Bald, we're pretty sure that was what was hunting us.
Yep. Gary said, sorry, gonna need a drink.
I don't know that I've got any better images. Oh, yeah, here's one taken directly from the video and not enhanced. This is directly from the video, folks. And as you can see it right there, sticking its head out from behind the tree. This is a direct still. And in the video, if you watch the video, you can kind of see its hand on the tree and then see its head. You see how high up that is. And on the video, when I play my flashlight, because my flashlight's actually pointing over here. And as I pan back with the flashlight, you can clearly see it move back behind the tree. And when the flashlight goes past it, it comes right back out. But if you watch the Joe Bald breakdown video, to me, that's the, and I'm not saying that we've captured anything like the Patterson Gimlin footage, because it's nowhere near that quality.
Billy Steve was there when that picture was taken. He's seen it.
Yeah.
Billy said, don't show it to Steve. He won't go back.
Steve was there. Steve was shooting the video. The Joe Bald video, breakdown video. I'll tell you what, give me just a second and I will just pop the link into the chat. So let me look that up. Give me just a second. It's going to take me just a moment.
And that was the that little bridge right there. Is that the one we found that was bent over, or was it?
No, that's the one that's still intact.
Okay. The other one was one right beside it was one that was bent.
Yeah, the one just down the road. Okay. Folks, I am putting the link to the Joe Bald breakdown video in the chat right now. And even though you can't watch it with audio, I'm going to put this video up and play the whole video. You won't be able to hear the audio. You won't hear it's my buddy Josh Jones that did this video for me. Him and my buddy Adam are the ones that did the video analysis. But I'm gonna play this whole video, and it's not very long. It's about 5 minutes long. You won't. I'll skip past Josh, because you can't hear him anyway. Watch this tree right over here. Now we were hearing plenty of insects, and Stephen, but if you look in the background, you will see eye shine a number of places in this video. Some of it's pretty high up off the ground. Including that eye shine, which was just behind me, probably about 50 yards behind me in the woods.
Yep. Right over your shoulder.
And this is where the breakdown comes in. Well, that was the whole video. Now watch how Josh slows this down. There it is. You can see it for just a second, but he'll zoom in. So check this out. Right there. Literally right there. See it move? As the flashlight goes past it, it comes back out. Right there again. See it?
Yeah, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, literally right there. It comes out of the tree. And as I'm coming closer with the flashlight, it ducks back. And then it comes right back out again. That's an arm. No mistake, that's an arm. And we went back to that exact tree. There's nothing behind that tree that could account for this. There are no bushes, no other trees. There's nothing behind that tree that could account for that. And now you see that tree and there's nothing there. And that's the Joe Bald breakdown video. What do y'all think?
You know what I think. Because I think we were stalked by, if not the same Dogman, one of his
the same group.
Yep, one of his buddies. Exact same type behavior.
Mm-hmm. And it was within 25 yards of us. Maybe not even that far. I'd have to go back and actually try to measure it, but there's no way it was more than 25, 30 yards. It was close. And the funny thing is before we started filming, Steve had gone out and peed on almost that exact tree, maybe the same tree. He went across the bridge to take a leak and then came back and we filmed a little video.
Did you see what Chris said? Hang on, it's coming up.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, you can see the fingernails on it.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's why I think that was a Dogman, because you would have seen fingers on a Bigfoot, not claws. And the head, the shape of the head, to me, that says it just looked like a big wolf. But wolves don't lean out from behind trees 9 feet off the ground.
And I'd say that's probably about as high as that eye shine was when we were down there.
Yeah, it was easily that big. And, I heard, I took another account from a guy who was on Joe Bald Road just outside of there, who had a large black creature that he described as a giant wolf chasing him in his car, and actually did damage to the front end of his car, and then stood up on its hind legs and ran off.
Yeah,
And
I remember you telling me about
just
that
outside
one.
of Joe Bald.
I remember you telling me that story.
Yeah, there was multiple. You watch that Joe Bald breakdown video. Watch it slow because Facebook will allow you to speed up or slow down videos. There's a little thing in the corner where you can you can adjust the speed of the video. Watch it slow. Watch how many times there's eyes shine. Nick Valente, I sent that video to him back when he was with the North American Dogman Project. That's how Nick and I became friends. I sent that to him because I knew he was big investigator into the Dogman phenomenon. And just within like a day, he got back to me. He's like, dude, you've got one of the best examples of Dogman I've ever seen on camera. He said, and I think you had multiple there. He said, from the eye shine that was surrounding you guys, he said, I'm pretty sure you had 5 or 6 of them there at the least. I think if we'd stuck around much longer, but because you can still hear the night sounds. You watch the video with the audio, you can still hear the night sounds. I don't think we were so much being hunted at that time. They were probably trying to figure out what the hell we were doing. But I think if we'd have played around down there much longer, things might have gotten different. And that was, again, we filmed that video in October 5 years ago, I think it was. It was the year Lakeview Man came out.
Well, we actually walked from that bridge to that tree because I wanted you to show me that tree, like an idiot. And we go walking off in there, and I mean, literally, that's like 20 yards from that bridge you were standing on to that tree.
Northwest Native, we didn't see enough of it in that video to know whether it had a tail or not. But that is, less than 50 yards from where Robbie found that 7-inch canine track. Table Rock is very active. We have yet to get into Big Bend Campground, but we've been into 2 so far, abandoned campgrounds on Table Rock Lake, and had activity in both. Angela Monroe, so even Dogmen chase cars. Well, it was a Prius. It probably figured it could take it.
Well, we found that front bumper.
Yeah, we found that front license plate. Chris Burkhart says, I've been in combat. I have no clue what I would do if I saw that in real time. The hair on my neck is still up. Dude, I'm telling you, I was a deputy at that time, still a deputy sheriff, and Steve and I were both armed. I was carrying a fully loaded Glock 17 right underneath my shirt. I don't know if you can tell because I was carrying concealed, and Steve was carrying a Glock 40 cal Glock. He was carrying a full frame 40 cal, but I had my 9, but I didn't see it. It was like a year later when somebody pointed it out. We had no idea that thing was there. And I'm telling you, had I known that thing was down there, we wouldn't have taken our wives. We went down there to film a promo for the Lakeview Man, nothing more. And my wife and Steve's wife were both sitting in the van. You can see my van, my old minivan that we had at the time. You can see that in the video when we pan the camera around. That girls were in the van. They didn't see it. They were talking. Steve and I were out there shooting the video, and we didn't see it. I didn't see the eye shine until like the third walkthrough of the video because I watched it a few times before I posted it on YouTube. And it was on YouTube for a solid year before anybody even noticed that there was movement behind us. Steve and I didn't see it. It was only when we were playing it on a show I used to do called The Nightmare Hunter. That one of the guys in the audience said, something's moving behind you on the other side of that bridge. And I'm like, nah, there's nothing moving back there. He's like, no, I'm telling you, there's something moving back there. And then, we send it to Josh and Adam to have them tear the video apart. And that's what we found. 3D Havoc says, "Is that how Jork was made? The van? No, that Jork was made in 1999. Well, actually, late '98, but born in '99, and that van was a 2015." Chris Burkhart says 9-foot beast could have cleared that distance before you got off 2 shots. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm firmly convinced if they had wanted us, they would have got us. We would have been dead before we knew what hit us. But I can't explain it. I mean, it got that close to us, and we didn't hear a sound. And I've talked about the night sounds and the wood sounds going dead quiet. That didn't happen that time. But the night me and Robbie and Noah were down at Joe Bald, it dang sure was. It was dead quiet.
Yep.
Roxanne said, "Did you see what Wyatt said?" No, I think I missed it.
And I'm gonna tell you, it was scary stepping out into quiet, but I believe it was a mite scarier when you're out there and everything is loud as crap, and all of a sudden it just stops like that.
Kevin, that's not the bridge that's bent. That bridge is still intact, but the bridge that's been up is maybe 30 yards away, 40 yards away. It's not very far. It's just out of frame where you're watching that video. It's a short walk.
And that's the one we both at the same time tried to bend it back up, and it wouldn't budge.
Wyatt says he's pretty sure he knows where there may be another pack of Dogman. Dude, let's go. Let's load up the truck and hit it. We may have to get Robbie down here sooner than planned if you know where there might be a pack, because I guarantee you he ain't gonna want me going without him. Matt V says, I don't ever want to see another one again. I wish I'd never seen one. A lot of people are that way, man. It rocks a lot of people to their core. There's generally 2 reactions when people see something like that. They never want to see it again, or they're dying to know more. And that's the way it was with me, and that's the way it was with Robbie. It just made us want to see more, made us want to figure out what this thing is. Kay Bauer says, hey, speaking of sounds, I got almost 2 feet from a rattler the other day, and it gave me maybe 2 rattles before I was backing up. That's another butt puckering sound in the woods. You hear that rattle, you freeze and figure out where it's at, then unask the AO if you can. Yeah, Wyatt, get with me, man. If you know where they're at, as Doc would say, I'm down like 4 flat tires. Robbie, can you talk about, I don't know, tell them about Lone Wolf Customs for a couple of minutes. I have to go across the hall, and my rental contract with my glass of tea is up. I'll be right back.
Rental contract. Well, I don't know if I don't want to talk about Lone Wolf Customs right now, but we'll talk about new group of friends that we made last night. Some of y'all were on the show last night, or in the chat from the show last night. Wayne and Tiffany from Paranormal Odyssey. Great show. Y'all need to go check them out. We had a pretty good show last night where we talked about the things that we found in Joe Bald and LBL and Combs Ferry, places like that. Go check them out. They're a pretty cool channel, and Wayne and Tiffany do a really good job. So those of you that weren't on the show last night, go check it out. It's called Paranormal Odyssey. Find it on YouTube just like you can find us. Go check them out. They got some really good shows. Ryan's going to be on there in November, I believe he said last night. So another one of our friends going to be on the channel. But we talked a lot about our Joe Bald, or not our Joe, but when DA and Noah found the deer last week in the Joe Bald area. So I think y'all will really like that show. We on there about right at 2 hours last night with them.
Yeah, I think it was right about 2 hours.
Go check them out, Paranormal Odyssey. Give them a like, share, follow, all that kind of good stuff. They'll appreciate it, and I think y'all will enjoy them. I chose to talk about Paranormal Odyssey, not Lone Wolf.
Kay Bowers sent me a picture of that rattlesnake. Yeah, you got close, dude. You definitely got close.
Yep, there's around November 9th.
Well, I think we've pretty well covered this topic. I was gonna move to give you, because I promised y'all we'd read a chapter or two from the new book that's about to be released, and I want to keep my promise. So we might go a few minutes over, but I think we're going to give you guys a quick reading from Heart of Iron. You guys ready? Y'all excited about that? Robbie, do you have a copy?
Mm-mm. I mean, I do, but I'd have to dig it up on my phone.
Well, maybe I'll just read it because it's just 2 chapters. It won't take too terribly long. I'll read it, and then tomorrow, Sunday night when we do the reading, we'll take turns. So I'll just read this one. Y'all ready?
Let's get it.
All right. The book is called Heart of Iron. It's book 1 of the Blood and Redemption trilogy, and hope to have the others out soon. And chapter 1 is called Raging of the Storm. And I always start with a quote. This one's from Robert E. Howard. It says, "But not all men seek rest and peace. Some are born with the spirit of the storm in their blood." The snow was nearly blinding as the haggard dwarf made his way up the narrow trail. Visibility dropped to a few feet with only occasional glimpses of the rugged terrain around him. Carefully, he picked his way between snow-covered boulders and icy footholds. He had long since given up on trying to ride his horse, deciding instead to lead the forlorn animal to shelter. Ice had formed in his dark beard and eyebrows, and his face was beginning to turn blue at the cheeks. He could tell from the numbness in his fingers and toes that he didn't have long before hypothermia set in, and he would die. If they stopped moving, they would freeze to death in minutes. The soft, inviting voice in the back of his head told him he just needed to lie down and sleep. The logical part of his brain knew that was suicide, but the voice kept calling to him. The weariness was creeping into his very bones. The snowstorm raged savagely against the western slope of Renganar Mountain, but the determined dwarf did his best to ignore it. Renganar was a massive mountain of granite and other igneous rock formations that jutted up like a beacon out of the easternmost edge of the southern Rhineck mountain range. Renganar towered above the other mountains in the area, rising nearly 10,000 feet above its closest neighbor, Miracal Peak. It was also the seat of power for the dwarven kingdom of Miranor. Even in the hottest summers, the snowcap never left the crest of Renganar. The weather was always a hazard in these deep mountain passes. The struggling dwarf knew that the west gate to Miranor lay only a short distance ahead. Despite the winter storm, he had dared the western slope because the north gate was already snowbound, and it would take almost 4 days to reach the south entrance. With the current pace of the storm, snow would bury the south door long before he could get to it, and he needed to make it to Miranor as soon as possible. He couldn't wait until the spring thaw to attempt the north gate. The wind redoubled its efforts, howling with fury against the lone figure that dared to defy it. His buckskin gelding whinnied in protest as it stumbled on the ice, but he held the reins tightly. One false step, and they would both tumble down the side of the mountain, then fall to their doom in the crevasse below. If that happened, they'd never find their bones. Their battered and broken skeletons would litter the rocky chasms of Renganar, forgotten and lost for all time. "Come on, you stupid beast," he bellowed, his voice faint against the storm. "Do you want to freeze to death out here?" Struggling, the unfortunate horse continued, ice clinging to its mane and tail. The poor horse held its head low, resigned to its fate. The going became even more difficult as the visibility dropped to nearly nothing. Just as he was resigning himself to never reaching the gate, a signal horn sounded above him. Then a gruff voice shouted out in the dwarven tongue, "Up here! Get yourself inside double quick afore this God's cursed storm takes you!" The weary traveler silently prayed to the dwarven gods for delivering him from the storm. "By Motsognir's beard," sighed the dwarf, relief in his voice, "thanks be to the gods." Soon the frozen traveler and the buckskin horse were safely within the gate. Inside, he could see the massive stone gates poised to close. They were only open enough to allow him to pass through. The torches in the entryway were flickering in the howling gale that fought to penetrate deep into the mountain. Only the heavy, iron-bound wooden doors at the far end of the large room held them at bay. Inside the chamber were arrow slits carved into the walls, where defenders could fire from cover at anyone who attempted to force their way inside the gate. There were massive steel rings hammered into the walls with heavy chains attached, holding the last resort of the gate's defense mechanisms. If the attackers forced their way inside, the entire ceiling would be collapsed onto the gate. It was a last-ditch effort to prevent anyone or anything from getting to the city below. 6 stout dwarven warriors, each wearing the livery of the king's guard, were waiting as the newcomer knocked the ice from his cloak and stomped his feet to regain feeling. Although they didn't have their weapons drawn, every hand rested comfortably close to the handles. The newcomer took careful note of the warriors' caution, but moved slowly to keep from provoking them. "Thank ye, lads," said the ice-covered dwarf. "I feared that I wasn't going to make it to the gate before the cold took me." The guards relaxed slightly, but their hands never strayed from their weapons. "You're welcome," said one of the guards. "What brings you to Miranor?" "Trade," explained the dwarf, "and visiting home. I'm with Clan Ironheart." Lifting his clan insignia slowly from out from beneath his tunic, the guards glanced at it before relaxing. "Apologies for the suspicion," said one of the guards. "Them's troubled days we're a living in. There's all kinds of unsavory type folks about these days." "I heard you," replied the dwarf. "You can't be too careful on the roads if you're planning on making it home again." "Let us get your horse settled in for you, and you get yourself by the fire," said another guard, gesturing at a side door that led out of the main entrance chamber. "I'd be forever in your debt," replied the dwarf of Clan Ironheart. Leading the horse into a stable just off the main corridor, the stable hand took the reins and led the miserable animal to a stall filled with hay and a water trough. "I'll take good care of your horse for you," said the stable hand. "Thank you," said the dwarf. The 2 guardsmen led the nearly frozen traveler into another side chamber, where they had a small barracks and a common room with a massive fireplace. The smells of cooking meats and baking bread were as welcome as the fire's heat as the weary dwarf took in the room. Although not richly appointed, it was as comfortable as any inn. There were several tables for the guards to sit and eat or drink. Chairs along each wall led to sleeping rooms for the guard contingent assigned to the gate. From the number of tables, the dwarf estimated close to 50 guards were posted here at any given time. "Put your wet cloak and gear by the fire," said one guard. "I'll be bringing you a blanket to wrap up in." "I'll bring you some food and something warm to drink," said another guard. "Thank ye again, lads," said the dwarf. "I won't soon be forgetting your kindness." The warmth of the fire was a welcome friend to the tired and frozen traveler. As he shrugged off his ice-encrusted cloak and tunic, the guards brought him a warm woolen tunic and blanket. They even got him a pair of fleece-lined slippers to replace his frozen traveling boots. Free of his frozen clothes, he wrapped himself in the blanket and huddled by the fire. One of the guards handed him a mug of hot spiced cider, which he drank gratefully. "Thank ye all, lads," he said after a moment. "I'd be done for if it wasn't for ye all. May the blessings of the gods be on all of you." "You're lucky that the lookout spotted you when he did," said a guard. "It was a keen eye and the heat of your bodies that saved you. We was about to seal the gates. Did you happen to see anyone else out there?" "No," replied the shivering dwarf. "I ain't seen a soul in days." "Seal them gates!" yelled the guard. Instantly, several dwarves began to work the mechanisms that would heave the great stone doors shut. The massive gates were close to 3 feet thick and 20 feet tall. They had to weigh as much as a good-sized building. They slid shut with a dull thump, and the dwarf could feel the change in the air pressure in his ears. He sighed at the comforting feeling of being back in his element. He could hear the horses straining as the gate master gave the command to seal the gate. You could feel the ground shudder as the great iron crossbar locked into place. Now, virtually no force known to men or dwarves could open those gates from the outside. The bar was as big around as a large oak tree and nearly 50 feet long. It was so heavy they moved it with a team of horses at each end. Legend says that they forged it in the heart of the mountain, and it took 30 horses over 2 weeks to bring it to the gate. No one now living knew how they set it into place, and not even a dragon's fire could damage it. The still shivering dwarf took his time to warm up and enjoyed his first hot meal in days. After nearly an hour, the feeling had returned to his fingers and toes. Once satisfied, he opened his pack and began changing into fresh clothes. After determining that the fire had dried the others out sufficiently, he stuffed them into his pack. "Bless ye all, lads," he said as he grabbed his pack. "My thanks to you." Opening his belt pouch, he handed each guard an imperial gold coin. "You doesn't have to do that," said one of the guards. "It's the least I can do to show me thanks," said the dwarf, smiling weakly and shivering. "You're welcome to sleep here in one of the spare beds," said the guard captain. "No sense heading down into the city if you're already tired." "Thank you for the kind offer," replied the dwarf. "Would that I had the time to spare. I'd welcome the chance to share your fire and hospitality." "Keep your beard dry, friend," replied a guard. The wary traveler approached each one of the guards, one by one, grasped their forearms in a warrior's greeting. Each one, in turn, butted their forehead against his in a gesture of respect. After that, he shouldered his pack and moved toward the door. He smiled and waved as he headed back into the main chamber. Once there, he stepped into the stables to check on his horse before continuing to the city. "Take good care of that horse, lad," he said to the stable hand. "He ain't too bright, but he's half Rhinac, and he's carried these old bones of mine many a league." Tossing the stable hand a small bag of coins, he gave the younger dwarf a knowing nod. "That should more than cover boarding for a few days," he said. "The rest you can keep. If I'm here longer, keep me a tab. I'll settle up when I come for the horse." Turning away, he began his descent into the subterranean city of Miranor. Whistling as he walked, he felt content to be back in the realm of his people. To him, it was strange to be under an open sky. Here in the dwarven realms below the mountains, he felt at home. The stone was as comforting to him as a forest was to an elf. No matter how much time he traveled on the surface, he never felt safer than when below ground. There were two ways down into the city of Miranor. One was the Cala Miranor, or the King's Road. That led its winding way down into the heart of the mountain. The other was the Kasharan, which consisted of an elaborate system of ropes and pulleys that lowered a person down several hundred feet at a time to different landings until finally reaching the bottom. Although he knew that the Kasharan was faster, no one had ever fallen to their death on the Kala Miranor. He was content to keep his feet on solid stone, not dangle over it like a fish on a line. Besides, walking these familiar tunnels would give him time to prepare for whatever awaited him in the city. Miranor was a hotbed of political dealings and double dealings. It was one of the main reasons he kept traveling so far away. Miranor was, first and foremost, a mining city. Delved thousands of years ago, the kingdom of Miranor prospered almost overnight when they discovered one of the richest and purest veins of iron ore ever known. To this day, Miranor is the greatest steel producer of any of the 6 kingdoms of dwarves. At one time, there had been 7 kingdoms of the dwarves, but Balandir had been lost for thousands of years. Miranorian steel was the envy of every sentient race, and the merchants from every corner of the world traveled here to trade in both ingots of steel and finished weapons. Even an average quality sword of Miranorian steel could fetch a high price in most cities on the surface. Mastercraft blades could cost as much as a small kingdom. The Kala Miranor was well lit by an ingenious system of polished brass mirrors. Dwarven smiths had used a system like it for centuries to illuminate large caverns and mines. The passage stayed well lit by the gathered and reflected light of the lanterns carried by travelers. As he trudged down the road, the tunnel stayed bright for more than 100 feet in either direction. All along the passage were side tunnels which led to private estates owned by the wealthiest clans and several of the kingdom's outposts, safeguarding all of the known entrances into the mountain. They were well defended. The livery of the guard and the runes near the entrance indicated which tunnel belonged to which clan. As he walked, he passed many dwarves at their appointed tasks. Some were guards from the city on patrol, while others were about on clan business. Few paid any attention to the dwarf in worn traveling clothes and armor. That suited him fine, since he didn't want his presence announced before he arrived. For now, it only worked to his advantage that no one knew his identity. Hours later, he emerged on the landing that looked out over the great dwarven city of Miranor. High above him on the ceiling of the gigantic cavern that housed the city, 1,000 points of light could be seen, reflecting like polished gemstones. They were quartz crystals that stuck out of the flowstone. Instead of breaking them loose, the miners cut and polished them to add to the radiance of the cavern. Below him, the vast chamber was filled with the breathtaking splendor of a dwarven city in its prime. Huge buildings carved from stalagmites and decorated with the craft of the stonemasons loomed out of the city, while other buildings carved from living rock gleamed with polished surfaces and quartz crystals. Massive stone columns supported the roof of the cavern in regularly spaced rows. The master artisans had decorated each with runes and designs imbued with dwarven rune magic that allowed them to glow. The brighter they glowed, the higher the sun was above the mountain. When they began to fade again, it was afternoon. During the hours of darkness, they cast a faint green glow which still provided enough illumination so that people in the city could move about without the need for lanterns or torches. Across the cavern, the great waterfall, Grimtooth Falls, emptied into a massive reservoir, providing clean drinking water for the entire city. An ingenious system of aqueducts sent fresh water to every part of the city to collect in cisterns where anyone could get water when needed. The most wealthy residents had private cisterns in their buildings or estates. They were all part of a mighty underground river that plunged into the dark depths of a vast chasm at the southern edge of town. The chasm was called Ganor's Abyss. 4 millennia before, a dwarf named Ganor Greymantle led an expedition down into the chasm. They never returned. Neither did the two search parties of heavily armed dwarves that went to look for them. To this day, torches of remembrance blaze near the edge of the chasm, and guards keep constant vigil over it, although it's an open debate among the dwarves of Miranor whether they watch for returning dwarves or for whatever could have killed over 100 stout dwarven warriors. More than once in recent memory, strange creatures would emerge from the abyss to attack the people. The attacks were always beaten back, but some say that the incidents had begun to increase in frequency and that a dark menace loomed in the deep darkness of Ganor's Abyss. Below him, the great city of Miranor teemed with life. His people moved about their business everywhere he looked with efficiency and purpose. He could hear the hammers of the smiths and artisans working at the forges and workshops below him. Everywhere he looked, dwarves went about their daily chores. He couldn't help but smile as he watched. It was good to be back among his people for a change. He loved his friends, but his heart was still dwarven. That was chapter 1. Chapter 2 is called Homecoming. And the quote says, "The motto of chivalry is also the motto of wisdom, to serve all, but to love only one." Henri de Balzac. Casually, he picked his way down the main street of Miranor. The Kalhanar ran from the city's main gate to the front steps of the palace. All along the street were the city temples, guild halls, and offices of the clans. The closer you got to the city center, the more opulent the buildings became. The city planners had built the city in 5 concentric rings. Each had a distinctly different style of architecture and design. The rings grew steadily more intricate and magnificent as you grew closer to the center ring. The dwarves that lived and worked in each ring also had vastly different dress styles. The outer ring were the working class, and the inner rings were the wealthy and royalty. Each ring was carved out of the living rock of the cavern floor, with the entire ring elevated above the previous one. This allowed each ring to see the magnificence of the palace, but still provided the maximum protection from invading forces. The thickest and highest wall surrounded the palace. At the very center of the rings, the palace gleamed like a jewel set in the city's crown. The dwarven runecasters had imbued the intricate designs laid in the stonework with magical energies that caused them to glow with blue fire. This made the entire palace seem to shimmer and flicker in the azure radiance of the flames. The clan crest of Maladorn Misthammer, king of Miranor, was etched in the middle of the central tower. The crest was an iron gauntlet clutching a massive warhammer with a head made of crystal that seemed to swirl with internal smoke. According to legend, the hammer was created by infusing the breath of an ice dragon with the binding magic of a master runecaster. The hammer was an artifact of Clan Misthammer and had been used as the king's scepter for the last 10 generations. The outer ring was warehouses and tradesmen. The architecture was heavy and functional. The walls were dense and thick. Not only did this area house the dwellings of the working class dwarves, but there were also numerous barracks for soldiers that manned the outer walls, spaced at regular intervals, and on either side of the 4 main gates. In this area, the sounds were of forges, bellows, and craftsmen could be heard day and night. There were the forges of blacksmiths who made tools and shoes for the draft animals, and workshops of the leather workers. The outer ring also housed all of the apartments and houses of the miners, laborers, tradesmen, and their families. The outer ring was famous for the rowdy taverns and other establishments of questionable legality. The city guard turned a blind eye since most of the soldiers were regular customers. There were very few schools other than apprenticeship or tradecraft programs. Temples were rare, but not unheard of. The second ring was artisans and workshops. There were numerous forgers and foundries here, but they mainly consisted of master weaponsmith and armories. The specialty craftsmen constructed the more sought-after weapons, armor, and clothing here. This area also housed the apartments and houses of the senior craftsmen. There were several barracks for soldiers here, but they were the lower-ranking officers and senior enlisted. The taverns and inns were better quality, and the temples were more frequent. The third ring was the mercantile district, where all the open-air markets plied their trades. You could purchase everything from swords to clothing to fresh food in different sections of the market. About the only thing forbidden in the great city was slaves. The king of Miranor had abolished that practice more than 2,000 years prior. The mercantile district housed the goldsmiths and jewelers. There were a few master-level weapon shops here. There were craftsmen of such skill that they received royal commissions for weapons or armor to outfit kings and princes. Most of the lesser clans held offices in the third ring. The houses and apartments here were of better quality. The taverns and inns were expensive and opulent, catering to wealthy businessmen and outsiders. There were numerous schools and temples where the children of the wealthy pursued educations that did not involve physical labor. The temples in this section were grand and extravagant. The fourth ring was composed of guild halls and business offices of the most powerful clans, as well as the higher-end shops, restaurants, and stores that catered to the wealthy. Some apartments were kept by the rich to use while in the city. All of the wealthiest clans maintained private estates outside of the town. The only military presence here were high-ranking officers, staff, and certain elite units belonging to the clans and the king. Can you guys still hear me? I think I froze up.
Yeah, we still hear you.
Okay, well, I'm froze up. I'm not going to restart my computer. And certain elite units belonging to clans and the king. The architecture in this ring was lavish, and only the wealthiest clans could afford offices here. There were no inns in this ring. Without an invitation, you stayed in the third ring unless you were a high-ranking member of a clan. The innermost ring was the royal palace and all its holdings. It was a fortified city within a fortified town. It could remain self-sufficient for up to 5 years in the event of a siege. If the water supply wasn't cut off, it could last even longer. The city's center hub housed all of the government offices, including claims and disputes. Taxes were collected and delivered here. There was a heavier military presence as well. Generals and their staff were on hand to advise the king, and the palace guard patrolled the area constantly. The craftsmen of the buildings within this ring were second to none in the 6 kingdoms. The dwarf took his time walking around the outer ring. He made note of which sections housed workers from each clan. The section that housed Clan Ironheart's workers was little better than a slum. There was only one freshwater cistern in the entire section, and the housing was of poor quality, even compared to the other outer ring housing. The more he saw the conditions of his clan, the angrier he became. There were dwarf children playing in the mud and filth. They looked malnourished, and the few shops selling food seemed to only have the most basic of goods. Even the taverns in Clan Ironheart section served what could only be passably called ale. There was truly little here in terms of comfort or prosperity. The dwarf shook his head in disgust. Clan Ironheart's workers lived in poverty and disgrace. There was no honoring the clan here. There was only despair and death. The anger, like bile, continued to rise in his chest. He passed through the outer ring and into the next. There was a different feeling here. They were better dressed, and the buildings were of higher quality. Although it was more welcoming, he didn't stay long in the second ring. He found his way to the gate and passed through into the third without challenge. The third ring was where he was heading. Passing through the gate without much notice from the guards, he turned down a side passage to where his memory told him the offices of Clan Ironheart should be. When he reached the location, he was surprised to find that it was now apartments for travelers, merchants, and visitors to the city. He looked in disbelief, unsure what that meant for Clan Ironheart. Mind if I asks ye a question? He asked a passing soldier. Asks your question, said the soldier. Where's Clan Ironheart? Asked the dwarf. Last I knowed, it was right here. The soldier looked at him with an odd expression of surprise and contempt. You're in the wrong ring, stranger, said the soldier. Clan Ironheart's been in the fourth ring for more'n 10 years. Where have you been? He said the dwarf. It's been a spell since I've been in the great city. The soldier walked away, shaking his head as the haggard dwarf headed back to the main road and toward the gate to the fourth ring. As he approached, the guard stepped into his path. And just where do you think you're a-going? Asked an angry-sounding guard with a nasty scar over his right eye. I'm heading for the offices of Clan Ironheart, said the dwarf. I'm on clan business. Ironheart, huh? Muttered the guard. Well, ye outsiders do keep some strange company. If you cause any trouble, we'll drag you back to the outer ring where you belong. The dwarf nodded understanding and waited for the soldier to step out of his way. Mind ye, said the soldier, stepping back, we'll be keeping an eye on you. The older dwarf said nothing as he continued on his way. He glanced back to see the two soldiers staring after him with smirks of contempt on their faces as he walked away. Last time I was here, he thought, I don't remember the guards being so nasty to folks. I wonder if the king knows how they're acting. As he walked the streets of the fourth ring, he drew many odd glances, since his manner of dress did not fit with those all around him. He was even starting to garner attention from the patrolling guardsmen. He could see the furtive movements as they followed him, watching to see what he was up to. Clearly, anyone dressed in worn clothing and weapons was not welcome here. Following the signs, the traveler found the building that served as the office for Clan Ironheart. The building was opulent, with a facade carved out of obsidian and red marble. It was a far cry from the simple office building he remembered from the last time he'd walked these streets. Without preamble, he walked right in. Behind a polished red marble desk in an extravagantly appointed room, a young dwarf looked up with annoyance flashing in his eyes. Dressed in fine clothing, ornamental armor, and a gilded weapon more for show than combat, the young dwarf looked officious and arrogant. He sneered at the unkempt dwarf who stood before him in worn clothing, combat gear, and a traveler's pack. By contrast to the youngster before him, his hair and beard were long and tangled, his hands and face were dirty, and his clothes needed mending in numerous places. However, keen eyes shone from beneath bushy eyebrows. This is not an inn, said the young dwarf harshly, wrinkling his nose as if the air around the stranger offended his delicate senses. I can see that, lad, replied the traveler, folding his arms across his chest. Then what business could you possibly have here? Snapped the boy. The miners' quarters are over in the first ring, warehouse district. You should fit in much better there. Eyeing him carefully, the traveler almost smiled dangerously, but thought better of it. A muscle at his jaw clenched as he studied the well-dressed and immaculately groomed youngster. His keen eyes took in every detail of the privileged youth, from the perfectly cut hair and tailored clothing to the complete lack of calluses or scars on his hands. He slowly took a deep breath through his nose and released it in a long sigh, pushing back his rising anger. Listen, boy, he said, his voice taking on a dangerous tone. I've got business here. I wants to see Viron Ironheart. Lord Ironheart doesn't have time for ruffians off the street, replied the petulant young dwarf. Lord Ironheart, is it? Said the dwarf casually, but with a darkness growing like a gathering storm. Last time I checked, Viron weren't the lord of Clan Ironheart. He was just minding things while the real lord searched for Ballandir. The young dwarf looked flustered. He was obviously not used to being talked to this way. He turned red with anger, and hate flashed in his eyes. Slamming his palms down on the desk, he brought himself up to his full height in a futile attempt to intimidate this ruffian who had such audacity even to be here in the first place. For his part, the older dwarf looked unimpressed. My father should be Lord of the Clan, he shouted, his face quivering with fury. So long as Balkus the Fool keeps searching for Ballandir, my father is Clan Ironheart. So you're Balron's pup, said the dwarf, laughing harshly. How old are you, boy? I'm no boy, roared the youngster, reaching for the gilded weapon at his hip. I'm a dwarven warrior and heir to this clan. You're a warrior, spat the old dwarf, his temper rising. Don't make me laugh, puppy. I've taken shits tougher than you. And it'll be a cold day in the 9 hells afore you're heir to this clan. Keep running your mouth and I'll show you the error of your ways. The youth drew his short sword and started to bring it up threateningly. Before he had brought the blade higher than his shoulder, the traveler stepped inside his reach in a flash. Knocking the blade aside with the flat of one hand, he punched the boy in the face with the other. The blow knocked the younger dwarf completely off his feet. He slid on his back across the polished stone floor, blood pouring from his broken nose. His weapon clattered to the ground and slid beneath the desk. The young dwarf looked wide-eyed with fear as the older and clearly more experienced dwarf started walking menacingly toward him. He had casually blocked his sword and disarmed him without even using a weapon. To add insult to injury, it hadn't required much effort either. The young dwarf suddenly realized he was facing a seasoned and dangerous warrior. Drawing his warhammer, the veteran warrior slowly approached the stunned youth. With fire in his eyes, he put the hammerhead against the jaw of the younger dwarf. Fear filled the eyes of the youngster, and he lost control of his bladder. His lip quivered in fear and anticipation. He knew that the blow would likely end his life. His eyes were focused on the emblem of Clan Ironheart, emblazoned on the head of the warhammer. The symbol was the sun with a crossed sword and axe, and the shape of a heart in the center, cast in pure steel. Now, boy, snarled the warrior, you'd best be telling Balron that Balkus, the true lord of Clan Ironheart, is here, and he's got some explaining to do. Whimpering, the young dwarf got slowly to his feet. Holding a silk handkerchief to his already swelling nose, he scurried down the corridor toward a set of double doors. The doors were close to 10 feet tall and made of solid oak. Inlaid in the door was the crest of Clan Ironheart, cast in pure gold, the crossed sword and axe over a golden sun, and centered with a heart-shaped ruby cut to perfection. Balkus rolled his eyes in disgust at the vulgar display of wealth. He had spent most of his life helping others in gold or in the sweat of his brow. Although he complained about it, it was plain to all those closest to him that he didn't mean it. His friends knew that he would give even his life for them and die happy doing it. The double doors opened without as much as a creak, revealing an ostentatiously appointed office. Balkus kicked the younger dwarf sprawling into the room, leaving a dirty boot print on the expensively tailored pants. Lavish tapestries adorned the walls that featured scenes from the history of Clan Ironheart. Rich, leather-covered furniture filled the room, with a large seating area near a massive fireplace. An enormous carved marble desk sat centered in the front of a huge window with a magnificent view of the palace. The polished marble tiles on the floor displayed the clan crest, clan crest on the floor, inlaid with gold and gemstones. The crest was only over 20 feet in diameter. A fire blazed in the great stone hearth at one side of the room. Balkus, displayed on the mantle, were the armor, battle axe, and sword of Balric Ironheart, the many times great-grandfather of Balkus. Balric was the clan's founder, and according to the clan legend, the armor and weapons were a gift from the dwarven god Motsognir the Undying for faithful service. Since the death of Balric, no one had dared wield them. According to clan legend, the only one who ever tried was burned so badly he lost use of his hand. Although over 10,000 years old, the metal still gleamed like it had been forged only yesterday, without a nick or a scratch, despite the many battles they had seen. They had been one of the few treasures his family had escaped with from the fall of Ballandir. Behind the massive desk sat an overweight dwarf with silk clothes. His well-groomed dark hair and beard gleamed with oil. He smiled when he saw Balkus, completely ignoring the condition of the young dwarf scrambling to crawl out of the confrontation that was about to come. However, Balkis could easily see the smile never touched his eyes. Balkis, my dear brother, said Balrin, his tone honeyed, welcome home. Although his tone and manner were friendly, his eyes never softened. Balkis was an excellent judge of people, and he could quickly tell that his brother was anything but happy to see him. There was treachery in his brother's eyes. There was darkness and greed there, too, as well. Balrin was clearly to blame for the clan's horrible conditions on the outer ring. Hello, Balrin, said Balkis softly. What in the name of Balric's beard's a going on here? Why, Balkis, said Balrin, smiling. Whatever do you mean? All of this, said Balkis, gesturing around him with disgust. You know I don't like wasting clan money. There's much better things you could be doing with what you've wasted on all of this. Like what, dear brother? Balrin said, his tone less friendly and dripping with sarcasm. Like sharing it with the clan so our clan brothers and sisters can provide for their families. Balrin rolled his eyes as he walked around the desk. He wore no armor or weapons, and his expensively tailored clothes cost more than Balkis had spent on food and lodging in the past year. The anger began rising in Balkis like a flood, and the dam was creaking. Balkis, the laborers and craftsmen of the clan are well paid for their work. Why shouldn't we enjoy the profits? Because when you're living like this, snapped Balkis, whilst our kinsmen go without, makes us no better than thieves. Don't worry about them, Balkis, replied Balrin smoothly. While you were gone, our miners hit a vein of pure gold. Clan holdings have more than tripled under my leadership. Balkis sat in silence for a long moment, digesting the information. To triple their already extensive holdings must have made them one of the six kingdoms' wealthiest clans. No wonder they had such ornate offices within sight of the palace. Look, Balkis, said Balrin, putting his hand on his older brother's shoulder. We've got all the wealth that we could ever need. Why not give up this foolishness of searching for Ballandir? It's lost, and we'll never see it again. I say leave it that way. Anger flashed in Balkis's eyes once more. Give up on finding Ballandir, he shouted, shaking his head in fury. Our father, grandfather, and great-grandfather afore him gave their lives trying to find it. It's our birthright. It's our kingdom. If it still exists, replied Balrin coolly. They died without ever finding so much as a trace of it. Is that what you want to do, too? Die like a fool? If and that be me fate, Balrin, said Balkis more calmly, we owe it to our clan to return to the halls of our ancestors, to our kingdom. Ballandir was the greatest of all dwarven cities, but mostly we return to our throne, not be servants in the kingdom of another. What difference does it really make, brother? Said Balrin condescendingly. Only you would be sitting on the throne. My lot wouldn't change much. Oh, I wouldn't be worrying about that, Balrin, said Balkis with a grim smile. Your lot will be changing a bit sooner than you think, and not for the better. Balrin's smile never wavered. Turning away from Balkis, he returned to his desk with a malicious gleam in his eye. He sat casually back in the chair. You're more right about that than you know, brother dear, said Balrin softly. I think it's high time that Clan Ironheart had a lord who knows how to lead. You're out of your mind if you're thinking that the clan will take your side against me, Balkis said, narrowing his eyes. Exactly, replied Balrin. But if you were to be killed, then I, as next in line for the lordship of the clan, would be forced to take over, especially since you have no heirs. And how do you propose that's going to happen, Balrin? Chuckled Balkis. Are you going to try and beat me in combat? That's the funniest joke I've ever heard. You couldn't do it back when we was kids, and you damn sure can't get the job done now that you're such a fat tub of lard from sitting behind a desk. None of the clan elders will listen to you if you tells them to attack me. And that's precisely why I decided to hire guards whose loyalty was to me, not to the clan, replied Balrin as he pulled on a bell rope. I pay them to listen to me and me alone. Side doors opened, and in came 6 large human mercenaries, all armed with swords and shields. Although they wore the symbol of Clan Ironheart on their tunics, Balkis knew no human had ever been admitted to the clan. These men were sellswords and nothing more. They did look like they knew how to use their weapons, though. Clearly, Balrin had hired experienced sellswords. Drawing their blades as they advanced, Balkis readied his warhammer and prepared for their attack. You'd best be hoping they kills me, little brother, snarled Balkis, because if and they don't, you might not live long enough to regret it. I'll put the hammer to your bloated backside, and that'll be the end of you. The first mercenary rushed at Balkus head on, completely underestimating the smaller dwarf. Balkus stepped to the side, and at the last possible moment, and the mercenary's sword missed him by scant inches. Turning in a wide arc, Balkus slammed the head of his hammer into the man's unprotected knee. Screaming in pain, the man fell to the floor, clutching his ruined joint. Bone was protruding from the skin on the inside of his thigh. Mind you, mocked Balkus, but that looks painful. The second attacker was more cautious and tried to outflank Balkus as the others got into position to rush him all at once. I'll be seeing you, dear brother, Balron said sarcastically as he opened the door to a hidden staircase. Do try to stay in touch. Oh, wait, you'll be dead. Oh, I'll be staying in touch, chided Balkus. This ain't over, not by a damn sight. You should have stayed away, brother dear, said Balron mockingly as he headed into the stairwell. The clan will be better off without you. That's for the clan to decide, not for the likes of you. Now, how's this for staying in touch? Without missing a step, Balkus whirled and threw the hammer. It flew straight and true as it found its mark. It struck Balron in the back of the head with tremendous force. There was a sound not unlike an overripe melon hitting the ground, and Balron's eyes rolled back into his head. He fell with a thud and didn't move, face down in the doorway to the staircase. Blood flowed from his split scalp, revealing bone where the blow had peeled back a flap of skin and hair. The hammer tried to return, but got caught by the massive desk. Seeing their opponent unarmed, two of the mercenaries attacked simultaneously. Balkus snatched a dagger from his belt and dove past the legs of the nearest one as they swung their swords. Steel rang on the stone floor as the two blows missed, and a howl of agony filled the room as Balkus's dagger sank to the hilt in the groin of the man whose legs he dove past. Blood poured freely from the brutal wound, running down the man's legs and starting to puddle at his feet. Balkus's blade had found its mark, buried deep in the man's left thigh where it met his crotch, and completely severed the femoral artery. He collapsed in a heap and tried to stop the bleeding with his cloak. Balkus knew from the amount of blood that was pouring from the wound, he'd be dead in less than a minute. That's two, boys, mocked Balkus, cackling with mirth. Are you sure you're wanting to do this? It's looking to me like you might have picked the wrong side. Yanking another dagger from his boot, Balkus crouched for the next attack. Seeing two of their comrades put down so quickly made the others wary. Slowly, they began to circle their quarry. Feinting toward the legs of one mercenary, Balkus quickly reversed his direction and threw the dagger. It found its mark in the left eye of the man behind him. He fell clattering to the floor, and a pool of blood began forming around his head. He was already dead before the body hit the floor. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see the one with the bleeding leg wound go limp and collapse to the floor. 3 down, said Balkus, chuckling as he turned to face the remaining warriors. 3 to go. Boys, this fight's fixing to get expensive. Are you sure you want to dance? With a roar of anger, the remaining 3 charged at him together. Diving to the side, Balkus almost escaped, but one mercenary got lucky and sliced into his side. The armor took the worst of it, but the blow still knocked the wind out of him and sent him rolling up to the fire pit. Blood seeped through the chainmail, but Balkus could tell it wasn't serious. He could safely ignore it for now. Sensing victory, the 3 raised their swords for the killing blow. Out of pure survival instinct, Balkus grasped out for anything. His hand clasped on a burning branch in the fire pit. With a bellow of rage, Balkus threw the sparks and the flaming branch into their faces. The 3 raised their hands to protect their eyes and stumbled back to avoid the furious dwarf. Standing, Balkus searched quickly for a weapon. His eyes fell on the sword and battle axe of Balric Ironheart. He hesitated only a moment before reaching for the nearest weapon. Balkus knew he wasn't worthy to wield the artifacts of his clan, but he couldn't afford to lose this fight. If Balron took complete control of the clan, he'd treat them worse than he already had. Only the threat of Balkus's return had kept Balron from taking over entirely. The clan elders wouldn't allow him to seize complete control without proof that Balkus was dead. Forgive me, Balric, Balkus whispered as his fingers closed around the sword's hilt. Balkus felt a tingling sensation run up his arm from the gleaming sword and into his hand. Time stood still as Balkus looked in awe at the shimmering blade. Swirling purple runes appeared like smoke on the polished blade, rippling like moonlight on the water's surface. They formed the words, "For the honor of the clan," in the dwarven tongue. For the honor of the clan, screamed Balkus as he rushed the 3 stunned cell swords. Balkus was as surprised as they were at the force of his voice as it echoed off the walls with unbridled fury. The first mercenary brought up his sword to block, but his sword shattered from the tremendous force of the mighty blow. Balkus's blow continued and sliced through the chainmail the man wore like a hot knife through butter. The guard watched in horror as his entrails spilled out onto the floor in front of him. The next guard swung at Balkus's back, but the mighty dwarf was too quick for him. Dropping to one knee, Balkus caught the blow above his head and shoved the blade back. With a quick spinning slice, Balkus severed both of his legs at the knees. He would bleed out in minutes. The remaining cell sword, not wanting to share the fate of the others, broke and ran for the door. Snatching Balric's battle axe from above the fire, Balkus whirled and threw it at the retreating mercenary. It split the back of his skull like a soft fruit, and he fell to the floor, sliding to a stop at the doors with a squeal of flesh against the polished stone. Balkus was breathing heavily, but not from the exertion. It was from the adrenaline flowing through him like an electric current. He held out his hand, and the axe of Balric flew back to him, ready for more. His hair and beard were unkempt and wild around him. They seemed to glow with the backlighting of the fireplace behind him, giving Balkus an almost otherworldly appearance and striking terror into the still whimpering young son of Balrin. For just a moment, the youth was sure that the mad warrior before him was coming to kill him as well. Quickly, Balkus surveyed the room. All of the mercenaries were either dead or dying, except for the one with the mangled leg. Balrin was still unconscious at the doorway to his escape route, and the pompous son of Balrin was huddled in the corner, sobbing with eyes wide with fear. Balkus wasn't sure if the boy was afraid of the carnage that he just witnessed or of the look of feral death that blazed in his eyes. Balkus was a staunch friend, but wielded the fury of a demon against those who stood against him. Balkus shifted his gaze to the sword in his hands as more letters began to form in the steel. They rippled across the surface, and he could hear them whisper in his mind. It was a voice he recognized, having listened to it whisper to him in his dreams many times, encouraging him to keep searching for Balandir. Lead our people home, Rune said. Aye, he promised. I will. Wiping the blade clean on the cloak of one of the dead mercenaries, Balkus looked at the sword again and smiled. Striding toward the fire pit, Balkus prepared to replace the sword in its place of honor above the mantle. Before he could reach the fire, there was a rush of air as flames erupted from the pit. In the fire stood the fiery form of a dwarf in full battle gear. Mot Sognir's beard, whispered Balkus. Hear me words, Balkus, son of Balcor, son of Baldag, son of Balcar, son of Balagast. I be Balric Ironheart. Take me armor, sword, and battle axe, and use 'em well. Return our clan to our home. Reclaim the throne and defend our people. The time of our greatest need is at hand. The image disappeared in a rush of air and vanishing fire. Balkus blinked, unsure that he had seen what he had just witnessed. Looking around, he saw the shock in the eyes of the wounded man. He saw the awe in the eyes of the young son of Balrin, and fear in the eyes of Balrin, who was sitting up near the desk. Blood was trickling down Balrin's face from the nasty laceration on his scalp, and all the color had drained from Balrin's face. Whether it was from blood loss or what he had just witnessed, no one was certain, not even Balrin. The young dwarf got slowly to his feet. Walking up to Balkus, he knelt in front of him. He lowered his gaze so that it was touching his knee, and he would not lift his gaze. His voice quivered, and there was conviction there. Forgive me, my lord, he whispered. Forgive me, my king. For just a moment, Balkus stood in surprise, but recovered quickly. I ain't no king, he replied. Not till Balandir's found and we're home, where we belong. Then I swear on the sword of Balric Ironheart that I will follow you there, the boy whispered reverently, if you will forgive me and accept my service. All right, then, smiled Balkus. Your first job is to arrest Balrin for treason against the clan and get this man a cleric, the one who's still alive. Yes, my lord, replied the youth. One more thing, boy, said Balkus. What's your name? Balak, my lord. Balak, is it? You'd best get to it then. And that is the end of chapter 2. That went a little longer than I thought it would.
I
And
told
again,
y'all.
I'm still frozen up.
I don't think anybody cared. That I'm telling y'all, that's just wait.
And that's just the first 2 chapters. It gets a bit more intense as things progress.
Just a wee bit.
I hope to have the edits done. Let's see, what is today? Wednesday. I hope to have the edits done by Friday. I've got to get the back cover. What do you call that? Back cover blurb. I got to get the little back cover text done and off to Adam. And the cover's basically done except for the back cover text and final page count. And if I can get the edits done by Friday, hopefully this should be out by Monday or Tuesday. 3D Havoc says, "Is there a gnomish battle medic in this story?" Not in this one, but there are clerics. Cajun Dog says Canton said it right. What did Canton say? I didn't see it. Oh, said that was freaking phenomenal. This is my first foray into fantasy, and I hope you guys like it.
Yeah, I think they're going to.
I hope so.
It's good.
Facebook user says, "I need that book now." Well, it is done, but the edits aren't done completely. The edits probably would have been done, but the way Balkus talks and a lot of the dwarves talk, and there's a distinct difference in the way they talk. You notice the dwarves who are more educated and who don't work forges all have direct, like, proper speech, whereas Balkus does the yers and ifins. The dwarves that are less civilized talk very differently than the more educated, like, highborn dwarves. So there's a distinct difference in their verbiage and the way they talk. But the way Balkus and some of the other dwarves talk absolutely gives Grammarly fits. Cajun Dog says this is up there with Conan. Holy crap, that's high praise. I love Robert E. Howard. What's it called again? It's called Heart of Iron. It's the first book of the Blood and Redemption trilogy.
I'm telling y'all don't have any clue what's coming.
And this ties into the main universe. This universe is where Will, Sarah, and Jason went when they went through the portal in LBL. Wyatt says Balkus almost sounds Irish. Kinda. The way I write him and the way I write Declan are very similar, but I tried to make Balkus sound a little bit more gruff. Hope I did well enough on doing the accent there.
I think you did good.
I think this is one that I may have to do the audio book myself, because the way a lot of things are pronounced, like Ringanar Mountains, Miranor, and some of the other names.
Like I said, just wait, y'all. Y'all go wait to get to get to hear the whole thing or get to read the whole thing.
Cajun Dog says Irish pirate. Only thing was missing was some Irish thrown in there.
I think there might be a few of them coming.
Maybe.
I think I remember something that almost sounded like that.
Well, some of the accents are a little thicker than Balkus's too. So, there are a lot of other characters that have yet to even be introduced. Oh, dude, Facebook user says this is on par with Lord of the Rings, Narnia, and Warhammer. Dude, thank you. That is high praise. I'm a huge Tolkien fan. I love the Narnia books, and I've read quite a few of the Warhammer books as well. So that is huge praise. Thank you so much. Curtis Murray says, I have to stretch Nightmare Hunter out until I get this. Again, I'm hoping to have the edits done by Friday, possibly Saturday afternoon before the. Saturday. We won't have a show on Saturday because I want to be with family. We're going out of town with my oldest son and his new wife. They haven't been married very long. So we're going to spend the day with them. So there won't be a show on Saturday, but we will do story time on Sunday.
You see what Cajun Dog said?
Anybody named Robbie? Um, well, yeah, maybe. More than likely, yeah. You're gonna see some familiar faces as well as a bunch of new ones. Facebook user says I was 100% on the accents. Thank you. Again, I'm not an actor. I'm not a narrator. I know these characters because I've invested a lot of myself in creating these characters and writing these stories, and it's a lot of fun. It is truly an honor that you all enjoy these stories so much.
And I would say the probably the last chapter, maybe chapter and a half. Would you say, Da? We sat in your backyard last time I was down there, and pretty much storyboarded.
Yeah, Robbie helped plan out the last probably third of this book. He was chomping at the bit to see it in print.
I don't know how. I mean, it was more like, oh yeah, what about this? Yeah, that's cool. I think this would look good, really good. It was fun. We sat around the fire pit and had a few Yinglings and just we actually kind of really storyboarded out
That and a couple other books.
Yeah, kind of steering the main story that all the books are because all the books are telling one big story. There's separate stories in the book, but it's all driving one big story. And y'all just wait.
Curtis, thank you, man. That is that's huge praise, man. I'm thrilled to death that you're enjoying the books and that has helped with your battle with cancer, man. That is high praise, and I truly appreciate that, man. Thank you. That puts a huge smile on my face to know that something that hillbilly from Route 3, Lebanon, Missouri, could write a story that would affect people like that, and I am absolutely astounded when people tell me they've like in Robbie's case, how many times have you read Lakeview Man?
30.
To me, that's just absolutely insane. I love that to hear that somebody enjoyed one of my books so much that they would read it multiple times. To me, that's the best praise you could ever possibly hope for as an author.
And I probably read Odin's Call 24, 25 times.
It's because of that one scene in Odin's Call that you and I became friends.
Mm-hmm. That's a
Weird
fact.
Weird how things like that work out.
And I'm telling you, Lakeview Man and Wild Hunt I love those series. I love Dark Frontier, but this one right here it's a different animal.
And this is the one that's made me nervous for a while. I didn't know how well received a fantasy novel would be by the people that have come to know the Wild Hunt and the Apex Predator and Lakeview Man books. This is a little outside of my normal comfort zone, but I think you're going to see all the hallmarks of my other stories in this too. Lots of action, fast paced, strong characters, and there's humor and there's going to be some tear jerkers too.
But there's definitely going to be some humor,
There is some humor in it,
especially towards the end.
yeah. Well, folks, we're rapidly heading toward 11 o'clock, and I know Robbie's got to get up early in the morning. I kept him probably later than I should have. I really didn't think those first two chapters were going to take that long to read. I figured it'd probably take me 20, 25 minutes to read them, and it took closer to 45.
Well, we still got 130 people here listening. So I think you hooked everybody once you started going on that book.
Well, folks, thank you guys so much. I appreciate your comments. If you would like to read the third chapter tonight, it is up on the Patreon. You can read chapter 3, which picks up right where I left off, and it'll get you another, I don't know, 15 pages into the story. So So, that's up there for the Patreon folks to enjoy. Noah and I are still working on getting all the pictures watermarked and the video watermarked so we can get the high res pictures up from our expedition down to Joe Bald. But those should be up on the Patreon in a day or two. And
That I'm not sure. I'm not sure Cam and the dwarven dialect would that might not be too good of a mix.
I'm thinking that if we do an audio version of this, well, not if, when we do an audio version, this may be one I read personally. And I think it'd be a lot of fun to do that and see how it was received.
I love Cam to death, but I don't know that this is one that Cam would specialize in. You're right, Cajun Dog. It definitely would be comical, but I can't see Cam doing the dwarven accents like DA.
Facebook user says this is a whole new animal, but hot damn, from those 2 chapters, this is going to be a series for the ages, I think. And yeah, this one's called Heart of Iron. And the character that the second book centers around is introduced. Actually, she was introduced at the end of Dark Moon. But she's in this book as well. Her name is Chandrick Silverleaf. She's an elven ranger. And the second book in this series is going to be called Leaves of Silver. Wyatt says he'll buy both versions for sure. Roxanne, it was my pleasure. I promised y'all I would share the first couple of chapters. They've been up for a while on the Patreon, but I wanted to kind of wet y'all's whistle with that. And this, like I said, this book hopefully will be out early to middle of next week if I can get the edits done. I've also started a new short story about Rocky Marlowe. The story is going to be called "The Demon of Paladuro Canyon." And I've already got it started. I've been cruising right along with it. I've also got the next Lakeview Man started. It's called Lakeview Man Dead of Winter. And I hope to have it done. Let's see, this is October, before Christmas. I hope to have it done and out. Maybe even faster if I can really crack down and get it done. Canton says I'm way too hyped for this. Now I'm going to have trouble sleeping. Dude, I'm thrilled to death to hear you guys say that. I really, really hope that you guys love these characters and this storyline. I can show you guys something kind of cool. Let me bring this up real fast, and you guys can get a first glimpse of something that is going to be in this book. Although you're going to get a black and white version in the book. This is, well, it's sepia toned. It's not truly color, but it's the map of the world of Valgard. And there she is. Right over here is where all this has taken place, the kingdom of Miranor. DA, we do autograph copies. Usually we generally do those at conventions, but if we can figure out a way to do book sales, direct book sales online, yeah, we probably will start doing that. Larry, thank you, man. I really appreciate that. Roxanne says, first 2 chapters want to put on the Lord of the Rings marathon. We've been threatening to do another like extended edition marathon for a while. I really would like to watch those movies again myself, but I want to capture that same kind of epic fantasy feeling. There's going to be some big stories told in Valgard, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it. And I'm really happy to hear you guys feedback on this. Well, the feedback from the alpha readers has all been positive. The feedback I got from the Patreon community was positive, and I'm thrilled to death that you guys hearing it for the first time tonight have enjoyed it as well. Arlen Niels is my favorite book, is the one that introduced us to Declan Kane. I think I've read it 10 times so far. Yeah, the first of the Dark Frontier series. Declan's going to be around for a while. I like Declan a lot. So,
Well,
folks,
they'll understand that at the end of this book.
yeah. And, some more connections will be made at the end of this book.
Yep.
So hopefully, like I said, I'll have the edits done.
A lot of things are going to be made clear at the end of this book to where you can really open up the rest of the series, because there's a big linchpin at the end of this book that's going to be like, everybody's going to be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, as Robbie has described my writing room as being like a conspiracy theorist with red string leaning to all these points. Some of those points are going to converge. So I can't wait for the surprised moment when people catch. And there's still some things that I've dropped little hints at that people haven't caught. There's a couple people have, but not many. And I'll give one away real quick. There's a little Easter egg in the Ragnarok Rising series. Toward the end of the series, Wiley finds a harmonica in a Civil War museum. That that harmonica was picked up on the battlefield at Wilson's Creek, and there's an inscription on the bottom that says Declan Kane on that harmonica. Little Easter egg there. All right, folks. Well, Robbie, like I said, Robbie's got to get up stupid early in the morning. My wife just texted me. Yes, my camera froze up. That's the second time OBS has froze up on me in 2 days. Something's crazy's going on.
It's actually the third time. It did it on our show Saturday night, and then we did it. It happened to us again last night, and then tonight.
Something's wrong with OBS. I've got to get it figured out, or quit using OBS. So, well, hopefully we'll have that figured out by the next show. But folks, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Got to get out of here because, like I said, Robbie's got to get up at 0:30. I kept him later than I planned on it. We ran almost a full hour longer than I'd planned. But thank you guys for hanging out with us. I'm glad you guys enjoyed the storytelling. And I would love to narrate more of that. I really look forward to doing more of that story. And I think you guys will really enjoy that whole book. Again, I'm hoping to have the edits done by Friday. Maybe, since I'm going to be with family all day Saturday, maybe it'll be Sunday afternoon before I get the edits done. But then it's just a matter of getting the back cover blurb and final page count over to Adam and finalizing the cover, and then we can launch. So hopefully you'll have that book out by early to middle of next week. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. I know it's been a long one tonight. And again, remember the 22 a Day Foundation. We lose 22 veterans a day to suicide, and that is 22 too many. So check on your friends who are veterans or first responders. Let them know you're thinking about them. Let them know you care about them. And let's get 22 down to 0. So we're going to close out the show with a toast. I know, babe. My wife's saying, "You're frozen." I'm like, I know. And the OBS froze up. And I apologize about that. And we'll hopefully have that fixed. But we're going to close out the show with a toast. And it's an old Irish toast it's an old Irish drinking song, but the toast is near and dear to my heart. So it doesn't matter what you're toasting with, what you're drinking, doesn't matter. But the toast says, "But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call. Good night and joy be to you all." Good night, everybody. Bless you all, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for joining us. Catch us again Wednesdays and Saturdays on Ex Machina. A special thanks to all our channel members and Patreon supporters. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe.